Excuse me, Your Worship, we're live.
Thanks, Chris. I'll just wait for I've got 1:59, so at 2 o'clock we'll get going.
I'll advise you that I'm having technical difficulties, Mr. Mayor, so I may drop out at some point and come immediately back. These are my dreams and hopes.
Okay, we'll look out for that. And I guess if we lose you for too long, we will lose quorum because we're down to 5 right now.
I will do my best to stay.
All right. All right, Council, it's 2 o'clock. Time to get down to work. I will call the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee for Tuesday, September 7 to order. This is our first meeting of the fall session. I hope everyone had a nice downtime in August and are prepared for a busy fall as we get back to work. I will start with the land acknowledgement. For more than 15,000 years in First Nations walked upon and cared for the lands we now call home. Anishinaabek, Haudenosaunee, Ojibwe, and many others who cared for their families and communities the way we now seek to care for ours. The town of Collingwood acknowledges the Lake Simcoe-Nottawasaga Treaty of 1818 and respects all of the nation-to-nation agreements that have formed relationships with the original inhabitants of Turtle Island. The reality of our shared history, the current contributions of Indigenous people within our community, and seeks to continue empowering expressions of pride amongst all of the diverse stakeholders in this area. We seek to do better, to continue to recognize, learn, and grow in friendship and community, nation to nation. And we have quorum today. We have regrets from a number of council members, so we have 5 with us. So if we lose anybody, we may have to break while we get that person back on. I'll look to Clerk Almas. Go ahead, Sarah.
Certainly, Your Worship. It looks like we have 6 here present now, so we should be good. If Councillor McLeod does have technical difficulties, but we hope she can join us if she falls off.
Okay, good. My math skills have deteriorated during August, it would seem. I will look for a motion to adopt the agenda, and the motion reads that the content of the Strategic Initiative Standing Committee agenda for September 7, 2021 be adopted as presented. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Hamlin, seconded by Councillor Berman. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. Declarations of pecuniary interest. Are there any declarations today, Council? Seeing none, if you find yourself in that position as we progress, please let us know and the general nature of your conflict. That brings us to item 4, interim control bylaw updates. And I will turn it over to CAO Skinner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Pleased to be able to report on a few things that have continued to progress aggressively through August. And we have a brief, the same updated brief presentation that we've used previously. So I think that it is about to be shared, but just want to let the clerks know in my screen, it hasn't come up yet, just a black screen. Perfect. Okay, thank you. So I'm going to go over 2 parts to this presentation, the water capacity and the land use planning policy in that order. So if we could go to the next slide, the first non-cover slide. I'm doing this in part because I want to update you and the public, and very specifically because Council asked that every meeting until the interim control bylaw is lifted, that we include specific updates for you and for the public, things like negotiations, RFPs, exemptions, etc. And we have included that in the presentation today. Next slide. So the situation, as council members will know, but I want to make sure everyone listening knows, is that the current water supply is safe and it is available. And as soon as we made them aware of this difficult situation and became aware ourselves as staff, Council has taken a very proactive and transparent approach to seek further capacity and manage that as which is remaining. It's been an exceptionally high priority on all fronts. With one of the first decisions, which was the maximization of chlorine, we have several years of typical growth available but not enough to get to our earliest expanded plant date of the end of 2025. So we have used a tool called an interim control bylaw, which temporarily and transparently pauses most development so that Collingwood can grow as a complete community that provides the things that people need. So we're starting with a land use policy study. We're accelerating construction of the new plant and any interim solutions, which I'll tell you a little bit about. And we're seeking water from other municipalities. And we want to assure people that work that doesn't use more water, such as most residential renovations and additions, continues. And as well, there's been a substantial amount of work that council was able to exempt from the interim control bylaw with a full consideration of the situation and the requirements, so that there's a significant amount of construction proceeding now, and I'll be able to tell you those exact numbers in a couple of slides from now. Next slide, please. So first, we'll talk about water. Next, water capacity at the plant. Next slide. So we have committed within the first 6 weeks of the water treatment plant expansion design to report back to council. That is scheduled for the Development and Operations Committee next Monday night. And to support that, we have issued a tender for UV disinfection opportunities. So it's going to inform the interim option and as well the permanent installation of the water treatment plant. I can't say how pleased I am with how proactive both our consultants, AECOM and Ainley, and our own staff have been to get their minds around and these type of tenders and decisions out on the street. It's putting us in a very good place for solving some of these issues. We have retained a consultant to look at our, as a third party, to review the maximization of chlorine and to confirm that we in fact have maximized what is available and that it is a safe and appropriate way to proceed. We met with the Town of the Blue Mountains staff on September 1st to share information and progress. And we intend to meet with them regularly going forward. Very positive discussion. They have a number of studies underway that will be reporting back to their council and ultimately will be informing their needs in the longer term, including any needs they may approach us and council to address after the construction of the new plant. We've engaged with the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and at the Assistant Deputy Minister level, one of the key deputy ADMs, Assistant Deputy Ministers, has reached out and agreed to set up a meeting to talk with us about the importance of our project and the need for prioritizing the ministry approvals for things like permits to take water and environmental approvals for the plant itself. So that's very important that we have strong ministry partners in this in these next few steps who are receiving our emails, and I hope acting to support the entire South Georgian Bay in some of the water needs. We are also planning to meet with MECP, that's the acronym, Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks, and both of our current partner municipalities still looking to find a date for that. Late September is the target, and it's looking like that will occur. And as well, the Simcoe County has a waste and wastewater service review underway, and we have met with them and included the mayor and the deputy mayor. And they've, RV Anderson, the county's consultant, is setting up a meeting with any of the all of the municipalities along the pipeline that currently runs between us and New Tecumseh, looking at their interest for potential water supply through that regional pipeline. We haven't set a date there, but they're actively looking for one that will work for that broad group. Next slide, please. So this slide is essentially unchanged from the last update. We've awarded the engineering design and we're working toward completing the preliminary design. Meanwhile, however, the secondary process of looking into interim UV disinfection at the existing plant has commenced. So I think that this one will also be updated with a second sort of side process once council and Development and Operations Committee are updated on that initiative as well. Next slide, please. This is the remaining water supply. It's provided in 2 columns, SDUs, or the number of single development units equivalent of water that are left. And also it's provided in meters cubed per day, max daily demand. And the latest update was as of the 3rd of September. And so we started, I'm going to talk in SDUs, but you can see the equivalent to the right. We started with, at the beginning of the year, having 1,091 SDUs left available to be distributed. Prior to the interim control bylaw, 119 were allocated. And through largely our exemption process and building permits, we've used 477, which leaves a remaining 495 single development units that are available right now for use till the end of 2025. So the interim updates at the plant would increase that number of SDUs, as would other opportunities that things like using the safety factor as we proceed through this work. The remaining summer SDUs are shown on the bottom row of this chart. And that would be if we were able to solve the summer-winter differential that the UV option could possibly do. So stay tuned for that important update next week, please. Next slide. From a land use and planning policy study update, next slide. The consultant's plan is provided here. It was provided in our July meeting as well. However, there have been some small tweaks that don't affect the end date. Most notably, there is a workshop for staff with the consultant this week on best practices that are happening in other jurisdictions and what their review has shown. And I note for council members as well, the week after next, you will be approached, if you haven't been already, in individual discussions to get some of your thoughts around the community values and things that will be important for allocating water going forward. And we have a meeting with council to present the recommendations from the land use planning study shown on the second last line here around the mid of December. And that's our target to finish at that time. Next slide. So anyone who received an exemption from council up to date, so that would have been the last decision was made in July, has been notified. And please note the exemption just get us through the study period. Once that study that we showed you was over in December is complete and we've had a chance to implement anything that came from the study, we will then use the results of the study. It'll be our recommendation that council use the results of that study to allocate any remaining water. And I noted the workshops already. Next slide, please. No changes in this item. It just shows where water has been asked for and allocated under the exemptions process. We've just changed the symbols so that they are more obvious if you can't see colors. And you will see that the requests and the allocations extended well across town. Next slide, please. If you were given an exemption, your application can continue through the planning process or directly to a building permit. If you don't need a planning approval, contact the planning department if you have any questions. If you haven't been granted an exemption, your planning application can still continue to be processed and reviewed, but we're not going to recommend planning decisions to council unless they make a future exemption that they wish to allocate water specifically to that project. So you would be waiting theoretically until we'd finish that planning study that I just noted would be completed around the end of the year. Next slide, please. And this is an interesting slide and the last one, but what it says is that as of August 31st, 2021, the numbers for building statistics, and just for your information, the building statistics from last year as of August 31st are provided in brackets. So we've received 657 building permit applications this year. Last year at this time, we only had 368. We've issued 492 building permits, whereas last year at this time, we had only issued 408. I'm not going to go through all those numbers, but generally we are on track or even in ahead of the amount of building that was running through Collingwood at this time last year. And I believe that would be the last slide. And I'll turn it back to you, Chair. Thank you for the time and the ability to update everyone.
Thank you very much, CEO Skinner. Questions? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Through to the CEO, just really a couple of general high-level ones. So the discussions that are occurring in the offside from our main target in terms of the water capacity, how is this impacting our process or progress? And is there any, I mean, clearly there would be information in these meetings that we didn't have when we proceeded into our current process. I'm just wondering if there's an impact we need to be aware of.
CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you to Councillor Jeffrey, if I could just ask a little bit of a clarifying question. The discussions that you're referring to that are offside from the main target, can you just tell me exactly which ones?
The whole list of meetings that you expanded upon today that are ongoing in terms of other water users, the county. So I just want to have an understanding as to how this fits into our process, and is it going to extend it, impact it as we get information from those meetings?
Thank you very much. And through Your Worship to Councillor Jeffrey, we have had some requests from the municipalities that we currently service that ask for water a little sooner, or potentially informally a bit more than they had asked for during the environmental assessment process. I think that that's a natural occurrence as MCRs and further studies occur, and they're realizing that the development may happen more quickly than they had anticipated, potentially pre-COVID or when they gave us those original numbers. My impression is that we wish we had the perfect numbers 2 years ago, but at this point, it's not delaying the process, but helping us to make good decisions around things like the capacity of the plant that we're targeting for the preliminary design. And I would like Director Slama to potentially say a couple of words about that, if that's okay with you, Chair.
Yes, go ahead, please, Director Slama.
Skinner, I would agree. I think that, we're having these discussions in an effort to help us make good informed decisions as we move forward with our water treatment plant expansion project. And I would also agree that right now they aren't causing any delays in our process for that expansion. And in some cases, we're hoping some of these meetings with, particular the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks will actually help us as we move through our process. And they can help give us some good words of guidance now, as we know we're going to be looking for ministry approvals and possibly a change to our permit to take water. And so we're seeking that advice now to expedite things in any way that we can.
Follow up, Councillor.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. Yes, so I guess my question really is leading to, we don't want to have to incur any further pause in terms of our development for waiting for onboarding this other input. So that's where I'm coming from. And I guess particularly to your timing of the ICBL with a target of December for that planning study to be done. That December is sooner than the 1 year we had forecast, I believe. Is that correct?
Yes, we passed it on April 26th, I believe.
Yeah, thank you.
Good, thank you. Council, any other questions or comments on the presentation? Seeing none, and then we'll move on. But before we get to the next item, the deputation, I just want to let our viewing audience know that this is the first of 2 meetings today. Now we have a corporate and community services meeting starting at 5 p.m. And I know we had some input this morning about comments on the trail at Blue Shores, the future of the trail at Blue Shores, as well as the Maple Street pilot project. Those issues will be dealt with at the corporate and community services meeting. So this is the Strategic Initiatives Committee meeting, and we will not be dealing with those issues during this meeting. So if you're interested in those issues, please make sure you come to the Corporate and Community Services meeting. And I will look to CAO Skinner. Go ahead, Sonia.
Thank you, Your Worship. I did see Interim Director Glenn flash his video on when we were talking about expected end dates. And I think what he was going to say is that our recommendations to council are targeted for December, pending there likely may be a county approval required if there's an official plan tweak. And as well, there's a possibility that there may be appeals or other process that follow. So we are certainly hoping to get the interim control bylaw to be lifted as soon as possible. But there is some process that would come after the end of this council's decision to make sure that we could implement that and move to our new allocation regime. Thank you.
Thank you for that. And my apologies to Director Glenn. It wasn't my intention to not acknowledge him. And if he has anything he wishes to add to that, please go ahead.
Through you to Mr. Mayor, Sonia covered off the comments I was going to make.
Good, thank you. All right, this brings us then to item 5.1, which is deputations. And the one deputation we have on the books today is the Affordable Housing Task Force update. And we have Marg Scheben-Edey with us to speak to the matter today. Marg is one of the 3 chairs of the subcommittees, and the chair of the Housing Task Force is Nancy Essen. So if we can get Marg up and going, we can get this started.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson and members of council. Thank you for allowing us to share this quick update with you in regard to the work that the Affordable Housing Task Force is doing. Just as a reminder, the committee continues to meet bi-weekly with a group of very dedicated volunteers who are putting a great deal of time, energy, research, and thought into this. And we are so grateful for Deputy Mayor Hall and Councillors Jeffrey and Hamlin, as well as our staff resources, Clerk Sarah Almas, and from the Planning Department, Nathan Wakush. And we've really become a bonded little team working with great devotion on this issue. In addition to our bi-weekly meetings, the task force work is so large that we separated into 3 subcommittees, as I've mentioned before, who also meet every other week. So there's definitely weekly meetings and lots of work that's been accomplished in the last 5 months. So I'll start by giving you an update just briefly from each subcommittee. So the property subcommittee is primarily focused in regard to the Birch Street properties that are owned by the town. And they have past their useful life as the buildings. The buildings are old, they require work. And the questions are, should it be renovated? Should it be sold? Should it be redeveloped? There are so many different options. And we had to really develop an understanding of all of the information in place. So the official plan and zoning designations, the valuation of the property, the unit conditions, and all the options that are available for that property, all with the goal of giving you as council recommendations that are reasoned and informed as to how you might proceed with those lands. As part of the exercise on the Birch Street properties, we've done visioning exercises based on all the things that we have learned, as well as to what an ideal affordable housing community could look like. And that takes us to the second part of that committee's task which includes looking at UN goal number 11 regarding safe and affordable housing. So we've been learning about different types of developers, different building options, information about public ownership and keeping rents affordable in perpetuity, security of housing and tenure, examples of successful projects around the world, as well as locally in Central Ontario. So our goal is to also bring to you as council a list of optimal criteria, not only for Birch Street, but for other projects going forward. Then we have the Grants, Funding and Social Finance Subcommittee. They've spent the past few months learning about grants and funding options that are available to promote affordable housing. That includes initiatives, grants, and financing opportunities through the county, through the province, through the federal government, through private and not-for-profit entities. They've also learned from presentations with private sector developers regarding what actual costs are and how financial incentives may affect the cost of developing. They still have 2 further presentations before they wrap up their work, and that's looking at shared equity ownership models and the concept of raising capital through community bonds. It's a very interesting topic. Through their learnings to date, the subcommittee is finding that the area is very complex with many caveats and varying opinions on what are the best options for going forward in increasing affordable housing inventory. What's really clear is that any solutions have to incorporate partnerships with all sectors in order to create a common vision of affordable housing, both rental and ownership. It's also very clear that we as a municipality have a very strong vested interest and need to be invested in the vision to accomplish anything going forward, whether it's profit or not-for-profit development of affordable housing. And so you can expect that the final recommendations will reflect that. The policy subcommittee, I tell you, that's been a tough job, as I'm sure our councillors can attest to. So we've been trying to develop a much greater understanding of the scope of the affordability crisis in Collingwood. And as you know, you previously approved the expenditure of funds to hire a consultant to help us with this work, because we have a firm belief that any decision-making should be data-driven, but the data had never been compiled. And so we feel that that data, is substantive and meaningful, and will allow our recommendations to have a great deal of validity when we are able to give them to you. So our consultants from NBLC Consulting have submitted their first draft report of the data to us. And boy, am I glad we did it. It's kind of shocking to see all the numbers there in black and white in the report. We do have some key data that we're still waiting for from StatsCan to incorporate in the report that will really help us to pin down an understanding of what our needs are and what the challenges are. But we're quite confident on that committee that we'll be able to fine-tune recommendations to council with that data in hand. The other thing the policy committee has been doing is going through policy and what is it that municipalities actually can do, what tools are available to council, whether it's through official plans, zoning, or other policy mechanisms and procedure mechanisms to support and encourage and facilitate the creation of affordable housing. Very complex area. And then I also just want to draw to your attention that we do have a regional housing committee through the Simcoe County Alliance to End Homelessness. It's a temporary task force and it's focused on South Georgian Bay. So it also incorporates Meaford and Town of Blue Mountains. So simultaneously to the Collingwood committee, the regional committee has also been meeting roughly for the same period of time with an eye to stimulating discussion and trying to bring about a regional perspective on the affordable housing issue. And I will say there's been a lot of shared learning between the two committees. Whenever we have guest speakers on one, we invite the other committee, and it has been very helpful and beneficial to doing that. So one of the things the regional task force just completed is a public facing survey. We asked people who have had a challenge in securing affordable housing in South Georgian Bay to complete a survey. The survey was widely distributed through agencies, through social media, direct email. The town of Collingwood promoted it through their social media sites as well. And we were hoping we'd get 100 responses, and we got 404 responses, which was, I don't know if that was a good or a bad surprise, but it was a surprise. So I do want to take a moment to share with you, just on a high level, some of the results of the survey, which has affected each and every one of us profoundly. Even though we work with this issue almost every day, the results have, as one of the Collingwood task force members said to me today, he was dumbfounded when he saw the results. It's really evident from the public input that we are rapidly losing more affordable housing units than we could possibly create. A lot of that has to do with market conditions where investors and property owners that have tenanted homes or units are selling them right now to take advantage of the market conditions. And we have an estimated 43% of buyers coming into just Collingwood are from outside of the area and intend to live here full time. So the tenants are being displaced at a phenomenal rate in the last little while from those properties. Also with vacancy decontrol, meaning that when one tenant leaves and a new one comes in, landlords can set the rental rate at whatever they desire. That would be called vacancy decontrol. So that is also creating a loss of affordable housing units, as is demolitions, renovictions, condo conversions. All of those are contributing to the problem. There was a report just released last month out of Ottawa suggesting that we're losing 7 units for every one we create, which is so disheartening when it's such a hard job to create them in the first place. It's really concerning because the challenges and the cost of creating new units are so complex, but erosion is getting away from us and certainly contributing to the crisis we have on our hands now. When we look at Collingwood's own Economic Development Action Plan, which you've all read, as well as the county targets that we're looking at in terms of the official plan, we need to grow our local labor force by 2031. So in the next 9 years, by 1,500 people as a minimum, up to potentially 3,000. That means new affordable workforce housing is going to be needed. And that doesn't include the backlog and the erosion that we are currently experiencing. And again, when you see the numbers coming out in the report, it hits you firmly between the eyes that if we have a crisis today, we have a catastrophe tomorrow. Of the survey that we did, 63% of the respondents are currently employed full-time. 74% of the respondents live in Collingwood. And 60% of the respondents require a monthly shelter cost. So whether that's rent or mortgage, including utilities, of under $1,500 a month. That's something that is no longer currently feasible within Collingwood. When we asked people what their options are if they can't find affordable housing soon, the #1 response was move out of the area. I'm sure you all noticed that a couple of our fast food well-known businesses were closed this weekend in resident dining due to lack of staff. And that problem is happening to us already. Wow, that's I mean, the percentage of people that said they would move out of the area was very eye-opening to me. We also heard a lot of comments from people saying that jobs do not pay the equivalent to the cost of living in the region and are not high enough for people to succeed on. Many of the respondents we asked about education and other questions have years of work experience, 2 jobs, high levels of education, and yet they're suffering. We also heard from business owners who said they are either considering or planning to close or relocate their businesses due to the affordable housing impact and the labor shortage that it's causing as a result. You've already heard from our local MPP or OPP, as well as the Rural Ontario Medical Program, that we're having difficulties at every sector, and that certainly came through in the survey. One of the things that surprised us was we asked for those who are receiving government assistance, what type of assistance they were receiving. And we had to check our own biases because the results were a bit surprising. The #1 response was CPP and OAS. And that reflects the challenges that the seniors in our community are having in maintaining their housing. I want to share with you a few of the direct quotes from the hundreds that we received in the survey to illustrate to you how people are feeling. These aren't statistics, but they're really true stories from our neighbors and our friends in our community. And I'd like to honor them by sharing some of those with you. One of the questions we said is, what will you do if you can't find housing? And the answer was, if I can't find housing, and I'm being honest with you, suicide has been the most available option for me. I've had to reach out for help in despair many times. The option I found is debt, working 3 jobs, or moving my family to a 1-bedroom apartment. Another is, if I can't find housing, my only option is to stay where I am, but I don't have heat or working sewage right now. My husband passed away and left a GIC for me. I'm a senior living at home now, but I'm using the GIC to pay the rest of the rent that's not covered by what I get in my CPP. I take $800 a month out of my GIC to stay here. It runs out next March, and I don't know what my options are after that, other than going into a nursing home. I'm not ready for that, as I'm still quite able to look after myself, but there's no other choice. We went hungry at the end of the month, waiting for more money. This prevented me from ever getting ahead or saving money to move at all. I now have a full-time job and make $30,000 a year, and my rent costs $400 less than my monthly salary. It's completely unsustainable. Locals cannot live here anymore. I'm 6th generation in my small town and will not be able to stay. I have full-time municipal employment, but still cannot afford a place to purchase, and even rent is so excessive that it's nearly out of reach. This is a beautiful area and I don't want to leave, but the city money is forcing all of us locals out who just desperately are trying to stay. Tipping point of utter desperation. If we don't get affordable housing rentals built, this has been going on for decades. When will we recover and be able to live in our hometowns? And then finally, this thought-provoking comment. When is the dam going to break? Or has it already and nobody noticed? The work of our task forces is very driven by these voices and the needs of the community. We have very much come to understand that affordable housing is a pillar of society, and the sustainability of any community relies on this cornerstone. It's a highly complex issue. It won't be able to be solved by any one party or level of government or by any magic bullets. But having said that, we've learned that there is much that we can do within our community, and that's the focus of the work of both task forces. We look forward to sharing our reports and recommendations with you in the next couple of months. Thank you so much for your time and for allowing us this opportunity to give you this input. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Marg. It's a very sobering presentation, and there's lots of work to be done in this area. Councillor, are there any questions or comments on the presentation? I've got Councillor McLeod and then Councillor Jeffrey.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Ms. Scheben-Edey. When people responded to those questions in the survey and suggested that they may move elsewhere, did they indicate where in general they might be going? Because the stuff I'm reading tells me that this housing crisis is not just a Collingwood specific thing, that it is a Canada and indeed North America wide situation. And so I'm boggled a little bit about where are they going, or where do people think they're going?
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship, to Councillor MacLeod. Yes, we had lots of commentary on that. So first thing I would point out is that Collingwood is one of the top 5 most expensive communities in which to own or rent in Ontario. So that means 95% of the communities around us in this province are less expensive. We heard from a number of respondents that even though rents were a little more expensive in Toronto, the wage rates were so much higher that they would actually be ahead by moving to a larger city center where they could increase their wages. We heard from a lot of people that they're commuting up to 2 hours. So living up the peninsula in Bruce, living in Shelburne, living in Midland, people gave us examples of where they would move to or recently have had to move to. And then we heard a number of comments about people suggesting that they would be moving out of the province, primarily to the Maritimes. And I'm sure you've all heard lots of people that are moving out to the Maritimes because of affordability. So yes, people gave us examples and they were valid examples. Thank you.
Well,
Thank you.
Councillor.
No, thank you.
Okay, Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you. And just to expand on Marg's, I can say a lot of the examples I have is East Coast, Manitoulin, north of Thunder Bay. So they're going to very remote places. So just really, Marg, I wanted to say thank you very much for so succinctly putting together that report of all of the work. It is voluminous, and I think it's going to take council a lot of time to really catch up with the task force and what we've been taking on to be really in a position to make the decisions we need to make going forward. And I think when I did the motion to strike the task force, I think it was the old duck on the pond thing, knowing that, referring to that dam breaking. I think I saw the duck, but I didn't see the turmoil maybe underneath. I knew it was a big, big problem, but I can see it's bigger. So thank you for that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor, any other questions or comments? Mark, thank you very much for that update and for all the work that this committee is doing. It's a very important task force, and you guys have really rolled up your sleeves. So please pass along our thanks to all of the committee members, our task force members, and we look forward to hearing back in the coming weeks.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. All right, Council, this brings us to item 6, which is the consent agenda. And the resolution reads, the Council herein received the general consent agenda, and further that the information and opinions provided in the general consent agenda items are those of the authors and are not verified or approved as being correct. There are 4 items today. 6.1 FCM letter to Minister of Justice, re-strengthening Canada's hate speech laws resolution. 6.2 local optometrists, provincial underfunding of eye care. 6.3 Alan Truscott, request for waiver of tenants delinquent water and wastewater account. And item 6.4 City of Woodstock, affordable housing, homelessness and addictions crisis. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please, for accepting the consent agenda? Councillor Jeffrey and Councillor Berman. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. And then I'm going to look for items to be pulled. I'm actually going to pass the chair of the meeting over to Councillor MacLeod as I want to pull one of the items. So go ahead, Councillor MacLeod.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I will ask any other members of this committee whether they need to pull or wish to pull an item for direction. And seeing none, as I want to pull an item for direction, I'm going to pass the chair over to Councillor Comey.
Hi.
All right, Councillor. So if we can just get you to stick handle the items to be pulled. I have an item that I'd like to pull, and so does Councillor McLeod.
Okay. Do we have any others? Seeing on my screen, none. Over to you, Mayor Saunderson.
Thank you, Councillor. And I'd like to pull item 6.2, the local optometrist letter re-underfunding.
Okay. And Councillor McLeod, is yours same or different?
Different, I'll be pulling 6.3, please.
Okay. So Mayor Saunderson, let's start with 6.2 then, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So the letter on the agenda is from our local optometrists in the community, and I did have an opportunity to speak with Dr. Cation. And this issue has been longstanding. It's not a result of any one government, but there's been inattention over a long period of time, so that these rates that the optometrists are currently receiving for OHIP services, which are children or youth under 18 and seniors over 65, have not been increased in many years, and the level of sophistication of equipment and the fees involved are at a point where it doesn't even cover their operating costs. So this is impacting communities all across Ontario, because on September 1st, the Optometrist College ceased activities under OHIP services. So there are segments of our population that are not receiving much needed eye care, and that then is being shifted over to our emergency wards, which we know are already very heavily burdened. So the substance of my motion is to ask for council to write to AMO, asking AMO to get involved and to lobby the federal or the provincial government to make sure that we can close this gap and ensure that our optometrists are being paid fairly, but more importantly, that our residents are all receiving this critical eye care. So my request, and I'll look for a seconder, is that council write to AMO, asking for AMO to get involved in lobbying the provincial government.
And it looks like we have a seconder in Councillor Jeffrey. Clerk Almus, are we okay to go ahead and vote on that resolution? Okay, all in favor? And that passed unanimously. Thank you. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. And through the chair, I wanted to pull item number 6.3. I have been in contact with this member of the public, and I feel like the letter that has been provided to us is reminiscent of a similar situation that we dealt with earlier this year, wherein there was a person who had a property, and they were had a situation that was somewhat unique and exacerbated by COVID. And I feel as though we're in a similar situation. And so in that situation, we requested a staff report regarding the possibilities for this person, for this resident. And I would like to do the same in this situation. And I wonder if I can turn, oh, there she is, to the treasurer. I haven't had a conversation with Ms. Quinlan on this topic. However, I do recall having conversations on the previous situation that she explored for us. And I wonder if she could maybe speak to it now, and if I can also get a seconder requesting that staff report.
Okay, well, maybe what we'll do is start with Treasurer Quinlan. Oh, can't hear you.
Right.
Maybe it's your headset thing again.
Can you hear me now? There we go. Sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. I think there's quite a bit of detail that is that would accompany this particular situation, but I will share that when our staff brought a report forward back in May to start to talk about how we were going to deal with the water collections, and in fact where those were, we did do a mass information we sent out information in the tax bill insert. We put information as there are new owners or moves within the town, an information package goes along with that, and it shares that, you know, at the end of the day, that landlords are responsible for water, regardless of their tenants, their leases, or anything along those lines. We've posted it on our website. We've communicated through our new homeowner packages as well. And I think what's somewhat interesting is that it's a very mixed bag in terms of landlords that already understand this and some not understanding it. So, and I would say if I looked at it from a sort of, I'll try and be subjective, about 70% of them know that they're responsible. And I don't think water collections, when it comes to this type of situation, is anything new. We're certainly not the only municipality that is going through this. But part of our, I would say, you know, and EPCOR has been a great team member with this. They have helped us greatly in trying to keep on top of both tenant and property owners' delinquent accounts. But we have the added difficulty that the town doesn't necessarily see, you know, all of the outstanding arrears on a daily basis, something like EPCOR would. So we have been working with them quite aggressively, I would say, and over the last several months started to communicate and create the disconnection notices as we requested back in May. And that is what has spurred Mr. Truscott's letter. It did go to his tenant first, and because of the Privacy Act and also because of our bylaw, it states that we aren't allowed to give the landlords any notification until we issue that disconnection letter. The timing was unfortunately really bad for this particular property owner because his tenant was moving out at the same time. So when we did post the letter to the door, our bylaw officers stated back and let us know that, you know, in fact, the tenant was no longer there. So they weren't able to hand deliver it specifically to the tenant. We spoke to the property owner. A letter does get mailed to the property owner to let them know that this is the situation. But in this case, the timing, in fact, made it very difficult. But I think if I could say one thing that is, you know, just a very important part of it is that water is part of the property and can be very held at the same esteem as taxes. So we're doing the best we can to make sure we're catching up on those sort of older delinquent accounts, but I think we've made it known as much as possible that property owners are ultimately responsible.
I'm going to ask a follow-up, if I may,
Of course.
through the chair. And so, can you explain a little bit to us, Treasurer Quinlan, how it came to pass that COVID played a role in this particular situation? Because while I understand that the tenants took off in the middle of the night and didn't pay their bill, I believe that the bill would not have been as big as it might have been otherwise were we as a town not had we not taken some action to provide relief to people in desperate straits during COVID. Am I remembering that correctly through the chair?
If I may, Madam Chair. Yeah. So I think there wasn't necessarily relief provided from a water billing standpoint, although the interest was foregone for a certain period of time. But I think what did delay was the initial, when the town took on going after these collections back in 2019, the initial letters were issued to the property owners and to the tenants in November of 2019. And of course, upon follow-up, the pandemic hit in March of 2020. And I think everybody put the brakes on, understandably so. There were a lot of things going on, and certainly I'm not sure anybody knew that the pandemic would carry on for this amount of time. I think we did the best we could at the time and issued or provided people with as much information, and maybe at this time, this particular address wasn't included in those letters because that tenant may not have been delinquent at the time. But I would say that the pandemic certainly had an impact in the sense that I think there was trying to be sympathetic at the time. And quite honestly, when it comes to this type of situation, the only, generally, and I shouldn't say the only way, but one of the ways we try and communicate with the tenants is to get a payment arrangement. And a lot of people, I'm sure at the time during the pandemic, weren't able to even promise to that. So I would say yes, I guess my very long answer to your short question is that I think the pandemic played a role, albeit we certainly are doing what we can to try and collect what's owing.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor McLeod, it looks like Councillor Hamlin would like to add something, so let's go to her before we finish up. Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Treasurer Quinlan. I heard you and I agree that the water bills are like property taxes and attached to the property and the owner. And I think the difference, the way I see it is the property taxes are billed to the owner, whereas the water bills are largely sent to tenants. And I see this as becoming more and more of an issue as time goes on, as we create more affordable housing units. And the province has required municipalities to allow secondary suites. Our county is giving financing to those who create affordable rental units. I know sitting on our affordable housing task force, we're likely going to come forward with recommendations to encourage in a number of ways the creation of secondary housing units in existing buildings. So, it's not fair. I do agree with Councillor McLeod to the extent that, landlords are in a terrible position, particularly when the tenant hasn't paid and then leaves. And collecting from an absconding tenant isn't probably worth the time even trying to find them and to hope that they had funds, even if you pursue them, that they could pay. So where I'm coming at, the only thing I can think of sitting here is whether you think there might be some advantage in approaching AMO and seeing if they would consider having an approach to the province where they would create legislation that would address the issue. And it might be water bills can only be billed to owners of property, right? Or it might be, notwithstanding privacy issues, as soon as a water bill of a tenant is in arrears, a landlord is provided notice. So I'm just wondering, is that something you think could be a reasonable suggestion that, in which case I would make a motion in that way?
If I may, Your Worship.
Yep. Thank you. I am going to resume chair. My conflict is resolved. And so I want to thank both Councillor McLeod and Councillor Comey for standing in. And so I think, Councillor McLeod, were you looking for any further action on this item? You're on mute.
Yeah, what the letter asks for is a look at the procedures, which is what we ended up doing regarding the other situation, the unique exacerbated by COVID situation that we found ourselves in back in May. And I just wonder if we could maybe do something similar like that. And if that requires a staff report, I would be happy to see that. Or if it would merely require assurances from staff that all avenues are being explored to protect landlords. My concern is, in light of the presentation which we just received from the Affordable Housing Task Force, is that this particular landlord is now taking himself out of the landlord business. And stories like these of tenants absconding in the middle of the night and not paying their bills, and landlords being stuck with $1,600 surprise bills that they weren't expecting, are not uncommon. And so if there's a way that we can prevent this sort of thing from happening, if we can even keep one more landlord in the landlording business, I think that might be worth our time and effort to assure potential landlords of long-term rentals that there are fewer surprises for them coming down the pipe. And so if a staff report on that is required for looking at options and wording of welcome packages and the rest of it, I would be content to hear if that's a possibility.
I'll look to Treasurer Quinlan.
Thank you, Your Worship. So one of the things that we have been working on with EPCOR is we are in the process of creating what's called a landlord-tenant agreement, which lets the landlord know that they're welcome to keep their water accounts in their own names as well. So rather than included as part of separate utilities that the tenant is required to take care of, that in order for them to continue to receive the bills, they could have that information. The second part of that landlord-tenant agreement is also going to declare to the tenants that we may disclose from time to time the arrears balances to their landlords without breaching any privacy information. Now we have the form created. We are looking to our legal counsel to make sure we're not, making any mistakes in terms of being able to do that. But that is part of our plan at this point. The second part also is that a staff report is to come forward in October's SIC, provide members of council with several different options, because of course, Mr. Truscott is not the only property owner who happens to be in this situation where their tenants have left and now they're required to pay the bill because they can't locate them, or they're behind.
Your audio is just cutting out a bit there, Treasurer Quinlan. I don't know if you can
sorry.
turn up the volume from your end, but you're just fading in and out.
I'll pull it forward a little bit. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. So a report will be coming forward in October, SIC as well, to bring members of council up to date as to where we're at with the water collections, and also provide a couple of different options as we've looked at several other municipalities and how they have proceeded, as they obviously have the same or similar situations as we do. And in fact, one is also using an external billing provider like we are with EPCOR. And we think they've come up with quite a good scenario, and would like to push that forward in October SIC.
I think that sounds very helpful, and I'll look to Councillor McLeod. Does that satisfy, Councillor?
That actually really does. Thank you so much. I withdraw my request.
Okay, good. Thank you. Councillor Hanlon, are you speaking to this matter?
I am.
Okay.
I just wanted to say my thought about bringing a motion forward to ask our provincial counterpart organization to bring this forward. I think maybe having heard the discussion, rather than bringing this motion forward later in the meeting, as I was thinking I would do, I'll wait till the October report of the treasurer on this matter that she's just referenced. And once I see that, I'll consider bringing that motion again. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And this brings us to item 7, staff reports, and item 7.1, CAO 2021-11, 2021 progress report, community-based strategic plan, and Q2 operational plan. And I'm passing this over, I think, to CAO Skinner.
Yes, please, and thank you, Your Worship. There is a deck that hits the highlights that I'll go through relatively quickly. And I just want to set this out, as this is a new approach that we have set up this year to provide quarterly updates on an operational plan that is shared with council. And it's intended to make sure that council and the public are aware of a number of ongoing initiatives that might not be up for decision, or potentially have already been decided on by council. And now you're interested in how things are rolling out. And it's also an exciting time from a strategic plan perspective, because we've just finished the first year with the current council approved strategic plan. You'll probably remember that not too long after COVID started and we were getting used to virtual meetings, in July of 2020, council endeavored to take some bold actions to move forward on 5 priorities, which was a tweak through a community process on our community-based strategic plan. So next slide, please. So everything that we do drives us toward a community-based vision. And what the strategic plan really is are the top items on how to move forward toward this vision. And it includes things like offering residents and visitors a healthy lifestyle in a beautiful and safe setting with active transportation, inclusive, multi-generational, artful, a hub of successful entrepreneurs, businesses, and a leading edge staff supporting council and community decisions that are progressive, accountable, and sustainable, that protect and leverage our unique core strengths, the things that make Collingwood really special. The vibrant downtown, the vibrant community, the healthy natural environment, the extensive waterfront and its interconnection with our town, and our strong cultural and built heritages. And I think that's the most important thing to talk about, is that we all have this vision that council has set. And there's a number of documents that further expand on that, including what this means, which is a couple more pages in the community-based strategic plan. And of course, each of our master plans set out a little bit more about what we mean by, cycling or active transportation, or where we're going with transportation, and potentially some of the steps to get to that vision. Next slide, please. And as staff, we think about things in a strategic framework. We want that vision to be achieved. And to do that, we want our strategic transformation projects delivered, which are those 5 pillars in the strategic plan. And that's based on delivering all of our town programs and services, which is based on individuals delivering all the work that's in their annual performance plans. And all of those are summarized at a high level in our operational plan. And all of that is underpinned by council providing resources and people paying taxes and user fees to build that wonderful vision that we have together. Next slide, please. So there's 2 slides here of the 5 pillars. So we have transparent and accountable local government as the first pillar on the left. And there's just a pile of things in every pillar. So I'm not going to talk through each of them, just the highlights. We've done extensive work on the judicial inquiry, follow-up, and accountability that I will touch on a bit later as well. We've set the taxes, the completion of the asset sale proceeds work. We've had the lobbyist registry annual report come forward. Even this operational planning approach is something that we hope council is helping council promote a transparent and accountable local government. We've got the hotspot digital parking pass and the quarterly financial updates and reduced debt that I think we've all been very proud of those decisions this year. The second one on this slide is public connections with a revitalized world-class waterfront. And there's been things like the boardwalk and the wave break installation in the harbor, as well as a couple I'll touch on later. Supporting and managing growth and prosperity. We've had significant change in that we now have a business accelerator in Collingwood. We have the Economic Development and Tourism Action Plan finalized and under implementation. We have some management through paid parking in our parks pilot and next steps. We have done some extensive work on COVID, including the temporary patios that have been successful downtown. Next slide, please. And the last 2 pillars include enhancing community well-being and sustainability, including the successful completion of our community safety and well-being plan. Was a big deliverable. We've had energy management, a centralized real-time energy consumption analysis dashboard for town operations use. We've got the climate change specialist recruitment in process. The traffic calming study has been endorsed by council. The policy is complete. And in fact, we have some interim installations of traffic calming devices that should be going in hopefully this week. We have the asset sale funds established. We've allocated, and by we, I mean council, with some recommendations from the treasurer, have allocated the town's asset sale funds to things that will put our town in very good stead moving forward, and was a goal for this council. And we've actually done some things that you'll hear more about, like baselining water quality parameters and installing sea bins and gutter bins in the harbor and in some catch basins for runoff to keep plastic out of our water courses. Finally, for encouraging diverse culture and arts offerings, council and staff have been able to have a number of new things and ongoing things happen. We continue to have we have new clock tower lighting initiative. You might have admired the wonderful light downtown in different colors, symbolizing key things that the town is doing. And we've had a number of our stories series coming from PRC, Our Land, Our Water. We have been doing a lot on inclusion and equity, including safer spaces training, cultural awareness training for staff and council, and a library inclusion plan and audit. I'm very proud of Director Culver now as champion work for the Unity Collective, and having diverse voices speak about what the town is doing in ways that they feel comfortable and they feel heard, so that we can help council to receive that information. And the Arts Center feasibility study that I know has been long awaited is nearing completion. And I think the community will be happy to hear council's thoughts on that this fall. Next slide, please. There were several key goals and that we committed to make sure council was always updated on. I'll go through those very briefly, but we have done extensive work, including discussion with council and the community on accountability following the judicial inquiry and the continuous improvement of town and provincial policies. And you can expect the year one report back at SIC in November. We have an asset management plan for our core assets that's going to be completed by the end of the third quarter and will influence our budget asks and requests. This is an immensely important document that looks at how much money we will need to have and put aside to keep our current assets in good condition going forward, well beyond the end of their current life cycles. And the asset sale proceeds allocation is complete. And today you will get a report looking at two items you'd asked for more information on, the reserve fund policies for the greening fund and the arts and culture fund. So that's coming right up. Next slide, please. With respect to the Collingwood grain terminals, the punchline is we're working toward providing well-supported terminals recommendations for council's decision within 2022. And right now we have the Built Heritage Assessment underway. And the first public consultation is complete, and there's a second one that will be opening in September. And we also have an RFP for the Grain Terminal Revitalization Advisor, which is in the market and closing later this month. Last time I checked, the Executive Director Peg had said there was at least 14 firms had pulled the bidding documents for that contract. So we're hoping to get some top-notch advice for council through that contract. Next slide, please. The official plan update is well underway. I've been provided with the first 5 chapters or so. Public consultation and council input is coming to council targeting the 4th quarter of 2021. And we've been able to align this with some of the interim control bylaw work. Underway, we have the new tech water supply and pipeline agreements, and I updated you on that a little earlier this evening, as well as the water treatment plant expansion design, and also well underway, and I'm quite pleased with the progress, as I mentioned. As well as some new work that I know council wants to be updated on with respect to solving our water capacity challenges. And I did mention earlier this evening that there's a lot of work and progress underway there. Next slide, please. The community safety and well-being plan is complete. And the climate change specialist contract position decision is underway. So hopefully we'll be able to announce a successful person for the up to 3-year contract very shortly. And we've been quite busy participating with our locals group, the Collingwood Climate Action Team and others moving forward, including in some energy footprint assessments. And we might want to encourage any council members who haven't been involved in the energy footprint assessment to become involved, and we can provide you with some information on that. Next slide, please. And I'd mentioned the Unity Collective previously, and there is a grant program based on a private donation. They've been assisting with the development and support of youth center initiatives, and the Rainbow Crosswalk project, of course, remains an icon of inclusion and a very successful one here in Collingwood. Next slide. So from a count perspective, we had 43 items on the operational plan completed in Q1 and 59 completed in Q2. In Q3, we've got 18 completed so far, 109 underway, and 40 not started. And for Q4, we've got 78 of those items underway and 45 not started. So I had said that it really was a thesis as opposed to a full assessment, that if we got 40% of the items that were on the operational plan in our first time through, which is 2021, I would be immensely pleased. And I hope in the next update, we'll be able to narrow on how close we are to that 80% of items. Next slide, please. And that's it for the update for tonight. I would draw your attention, if you haven't read the full report, there are several appendices that talk in more detail about the operational items that are on the plan, and members of the community may find some of those items quite interesting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, CAO Skinner. Council, comments or questions on the Q2 update and strategic plan progress? Very thorough report. There, Councillor Hamlin is back. So are there any questions, comments, Council? It's a very thorough report, and it's an important document for our roadmap as we move forward. And so thank you for that thorough report. And that brings us to the next item, 7.2, which is the international development programming through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities. And I believe Executive Director Peg is going to take us through this.
Thank you, Worship. So Council directed staff to prepare a report on the feasibility of the Town of Collingwood participating in international development programming offered through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, or FCM. Staff have completed this analysis and recommend that Council support an application in response to a FCM future call for municipal community participants in international programming that aligns with the priorities that are set for us in our community-based strategic plan. FCM's work is centered around core focused areas. These include climate and sustainability, affordable housing, inclusive communities, Indigenous partnerships, infrastructure, public safety, among others. Each of the program mandates vary, but have the end goal of collaboratively finding solutions to national and global challenges that affect municipalities. These core focus areas align to our strategic plan pillars of transparent and accountable local government, support and manage growth and prosperity, enhance community well-being and sustainability, and encourage diverse culture and art offerings. Participation would provide several benefits. To highlight a few, and of course they're also noted within the report, these would include obtaining a broader perspective on pressing global issues such as social inclusion, an opportunity to learn about global best and next practices in environmental sustainability, affordable housing, and other focus areas, gain valuable additional perspectives on effective and efficient service delivery, and provide a unique and rewarding opportunity for professional development of staff and members in council. It is worth noting that there is no direct budget impact because of participation. The program is funded by the federal government through Global Affairs Canada, and the town will be responsible to cover payroll and time costs for municipal administration participants as part of our in-kind contribution to the Global Affairs Canada and FCM contract. FCM provides professional support to the project team and ensures accountable and transparent process through the work that's done through project management and oversight. And FCM's international programming is regarded as a mutually rewarding and collective experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director. And I think I've got to back up a little here. I think before I get council involved, I've got to open the floor for our viewers. If anyone in our audience, Clerk almost has any questions or comments on this issue.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we do have attendees to our meeting today. So if anybody wishes to address the staff report, please press the raise your hand feature on the bottom of your screen and we will unmute you. And at this point, it does not look like anybody wishes to speak to the staff report at this moment.
Thank you, Clerk Almost. So I'll read the resolution and get it on the floor. The staff report CCS 2021-1 International Development Programming through the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, FCM, be received, and the council support an application in response to an FCM future call for municipal community participants in an international program that aligns with the priorities of the community-based strategic plan. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Before I take that, I'm just going to check in with Clerk.
Certainly. Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry for interrupting. We do have Mr. Yuli Rath would like to address the committee on this report.
Okay, please put Mr. Rath through. Good afternoon, Mr. Rath. Can you hear us?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
We can. Go ahead, sir.
My apologies for being a bit late. I had a little problem here on the domestic side. My question is whether or not the strategic plan needs to be amended to take into account the fact that we have essentially a development freeze for the next 3 or 4 years, and that thereafter we still don't know what the projections for the growth of the town of Collingwood will be relative to the current municipal comprehensive review mandated by the province that requires an official amendment or an amendment to our official plan.
Okay, I'm going, yep, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead, Mr.
No,
Rath.
sorry, just that was my question. I have several aspects of that, but this was one of them that relates to this plan, that one of the central premises on which it was based was a certain growth profile, which now looks very much more in doubt.
I'm going to look to Interim Director Glenn to respond to that, the planning aspects of that.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to you. Our official plan is in the final stages of development before we go into the public consultation. It will deal with the growth scenarios, both on the residential and the employment side, to 2041. So the town will have a population number and an employment number that it will be planning to within the community within that horizon of 2041. There isn't really, at this point, in regards to the interim control bylaw, as you heard earlier, we will have recommendations for council on implementation in early or late 2021 for implementation in early 2022. So those numbers should start to crystallize in this fall in the official plan, as well as the county moving forward with their municipal comprehensive review.
Thank you, Interim Director Glenn. Does that answer your question, Mr. Rath?
With your permission, Your Honor, I'd like to ask a follow-up.
Go ahead.
Can you tell me what are the numbers you're currently working on for population and growth to 2041, since they've never been made public?
Interim Director?
We're working through those numbers right now in the finalization. They will be part of the public exercise going forward this fall as part of the official plan.
So, Mr. Rath, the numbers are being worked through and they will come up for public consultation this fall.
Yes, I understand the schedule. Sorry, through you, Your Honor. I understand the schedule as it's been laid down by the County of Simcoe for all of that. What I'm saying is when all of this was done, we were not aware that we didn't have an adequate wastewater treatment capacity and that we're now facing an extraordinary capital item, probably the largest capital item in the recent history of the town of Collingwood. And it would be useful to know on what kind of projections of growth is this plant being based? Because there are a number of different scenarios possible. And I think that's important to bring those out in a strategic plan. After all, isn't that one of the purposes of a strategic plan, to lay out, for example, we've been on a high growth scenario, what the county calls a PSA. We're one of the fastest growing nodes in the county of Simcoe, but we've never looked at a medium growth or possibly even a slower growth. And given the fact that we will have virtually no growth for the next several years, shouldn't we be revisiting those scenarios as part of a strategic plan before they get stuck into an official plan? That's really what I'm getting at. My understanding of the strategic planning process, it's a scenario-driven process. It was based on one scenario. Now that scenario is in doubt. We can make guesses, but we have no firm foundation. We don't know the time when the new plant will come on. We don't know whether it's for fast growth or slow growth. We don't know how much the current taxpayers have to fund for something that could be well over $60 million and possibly $70 million. And we will only find that out when those numbers are stuck in the official plan. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to attend this meeting, because I have done strategic planning before, and I understand the purpose of a strategic plan is to revisit certain scenarios. And that's really what I'm requesting.
Okay. So I appreciate that. And you're right. A strategic plan is a living document. And this one goes to 2023. Our water plant expansion was always planned, Mr. Roth. So it's been part of our water planning processes. And the cost sharing arrangement is part of our agreement with New Tecumseh. So that will be coming forward very shortly. Our planning numbers for 2031 are set, and it's my understanding that we will still be meeting those targets. And we're coming up with a water allocation framework when we get the ICBL lifted at the end of December, beginning of January, and that will give an allocation framework to take us forward to 2025, 26, when the new water treatment plant comes online. But I agree with you. We should always be revisiting our strategic plan to make sure it aligns. And with that said, I'll look to either CAO Skinner or Interim Director Glenn to add anything to that.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the growth scenario about slow, medium, and high growth, the province of Ontario determines how much the county of Simcoe is going to grow, and it's a minimum target in which the county must meet. And the county is going through their municipal comprehensive review to assign numbers to each of its local municipalities. And those are the numbers that we need to plan to. So we've been working with the county as well as our own planning consultant to determine what those numbers are for 2041 and what they would look like for 2051. And that will predetermine, it's not a scenario-based growth, it's an assignment of growth based on population and employment. It's a little bit different than historically how municipalities have looked at growth. Since the growth plan came in 2006, it's a fixed number that you need to plan to, and it's not a scenario-based scenario. It's not scenario-based anymore.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm participating in the municipal comprehensive review. I've participated in them previously, and I have listened for many years to being told these numbers are just assigned by the county of Simcoe, and we do as we're told. With due respect, sir, I'm told by the municipal council review people that they look to the underlying towns to come forward with recommendations and suggestions as to what is possible and not possible. This is not, sir, a process whereby someone in the county of Simcoe says, well, we have 550,000 number for employment and growth and 198,000 of population given to us by the province, and here's your share. That is not what I was told is happening at the county of Simcoe. So I do not believe, sir, that this is just a kind of a static process where we are assigned something from on high without consultation and input. And I believe the strategic plan that we have, being a living document, is an opportunity for us to maybe take a step back and look at a number of scenarios so we can advise the county of Simcoe what we believe we can achieve, since clearly not knowing about the wastewater treatment capacity and not being able to continue to develop the way we had planned has already highlighted a significant shortfall somewhere in our system to properly develop this town.
All right, I'm going to allow Interim Director Glenn to respond to this, but Mr. Rath, if you have additional questions after that, it might be a good idea if we can come in and have an offline discussion where there can be a more.
I would be delighted. I had actually sent a letter to that effect to the clerk, but I guess I missed the deadline. So that was my purpose. But I felt this was such an important meeting, given the timing, that I do believe, with all sincerity and not wanting to be in any way obstructionist, that the town is facing something quite unusual. And to just carry on with a strategic plan that doesn't reflect possible alternatives. For example, for the discussion with us, the residents, and the town and people, as to what is more achievable so we don't in the future get overstretched and aren't able to meet these things. I don't think that's an unreasonable position to take.
Okay, well, I think what we'll do then, Mr. Roth, is arrange, unless Interim Director Glenn, do you have anything you'd like to say in response to that just now?
Just to you, Mr. Mayor, it's not, the town is working with the county of Simcoe on the municipal comprehensive review and the assignment of the numbers in the population and employment. So it is an exercise at iterative. It's not a top-down approach. It is iterative with the town and the county. I would be glad to talk to Mr. Roth outside of council with regards to answering some of his questions on growth management.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, Mr. Roth, thank you very much for your input.
My apologies, I'm having a little domestic. Yes, I would very much welcome that. I have written on this matter already to the Municipal Council Review. They have taken my comments on board. I have tried to interact wherever public input is wanted. And I believe the council would do the town and its residents a good deed by saying, hey, let's have a look at what we think this town should be, not what just gets assigned to us, as I've just been told by the county of Simcoe.
Well, we appreciate that. And I think Interim Director Glenn indicated it's an iterative process, but we welcome your input.
Yes.
And you can have an offline meeting. So thank you for your contribution today, Mr. Rath.
Thank you.
All right, Council, my apologies. I did not bring forward the resolution for item 7.1, but what I propose we do is finish item 7.2, and then we will go back and I will ask the clerk to look for public input on that item as well. So I need a mover and a seconder then for the resolution that was read in. I got Councillor Berman and Councillor Jeffrey. Are there any questions or comments, Council, before I call the vote on item 7.2? Councillor Hammond.
Sorry, I don't have my agenda open. Is 7.2 the one to deal with the international involvement through FCM?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to remark on. Thank you. It was interesting to me to have this item come up following the very extensive presentation by our CAO on the things that our town is involved in currently. And it's our staff and our council, which of course is part-time, but several of us are working at it full-time to manage what's required for themselves. I know that our council and staff, we work on very local things that are expected. Traffic calming, changing the speed limits, pilot projects for parking, things that we would typically expect. And then we also deal with local matters that are not so typical. How do we recruit more family doctors? Our whole judicial inquiry and the follow-up and the change in accountability and so on and so on. And not to mention our once in 20-year official plan review when we should have been doing it every 5 years. And then we have on top of that things that aren't local at all, one might say, typically like our UN pilot projects, of which there's 10 that we're supposed to bring forward. We're the home and do a lot of funding for the business accelerator for South Georgian Bay. We're considering redeveloping and what's involved with the grain terminals, whereas most smaller municipalities would just demolish it. And we're dealing with the expansion of our water plant that services not just our town, but other communities and, negotiating with them. So I'm wondering whether, and I asked through you, Mr. Mayor, perhaps to our CAO, or I guess instead I should be asking Executive Director Peg, because it was her presentation. Do we have the staff resources and the council bandwidth to take on more international projects? And I say this in the context that, we're supposed to be creating 10 pilot projects for the UN right now. And I know there's a committee working on that. But I'm just afraid, and I'm not opposed to greater education and all that international involvement could bring to our staff and our council. But I'm just wondering if this is the time and this is the year. Do we have the resources at the staff and council bandwidth to deal with this? Thank you.
Executive Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Hamlin. So I will leave the comments surrounding council capacity to CAO Skinner, but I will certainly comment regarding staff capacity. I was certainly remiss in my initial introduction of the report to mention my previous experience with FCM participating as a delegate on one of the missions that the town of Innisfil participated in. And I bring that up now because I think it's a good example of how this international involvement can actually bring incredible value to the municipality that's participating. And I'll share an example. So I was a delegate in Nushwa. I probably am not pronouncing that correctly, but I spent quite some time, 2 weeks in South Africa with former Mayor Walkup working on economic development pieces there. And it became incredibly apparent to me within our first day-long meeting that this was mutually beneficial. This wasn't Innisfil going to help Nushwa. This was Nushwa and Innisfil working together on local problems that impacted both of our communities. And a very specific example, and I'm sure there, depending on what program we got involved in with FCM, there would be many others, but specific to this experience was around supporting women and youth in entrepreneurial endeavors. So Innisfil had within their mandate in economic development to help encourage women and youth to become entrepreneurs, and had programs, et cetera, and supports that were made available within the community. But through our experience in Nushwa, we learned an incredible amount of information that helped us enhance our program at home. And we actually saw greater participation and benefit from the learnings through our experience with Nushwa. In addition, FCM provided incredible support to the process in terms of project management, oversight, templates, the administration, so that the impact on staff and capacity was minimal, and it was really focused on the learnings that were involved in the partnership. Looking at our strategic plan initiatives, and as highlighted by CAO Skinner this afternoon, and looking at the different international programs that FCM provides, I am confident that the alignment would continue. So I do feel that in terms of staff capacity, there would be great opportunity that would align with those objectives already set by council. Thank you.
Thank you, Executive Director. Any follow-up, Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you. Also through you, Mr. Mayor. So do you have an idea of how many staff would be involved in such an endeavor?
Executive Director.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Councillor Hamlin. Through my analysis, it would depend on the program that was selected or what initiative that we got involved in. Certainly the FCM is not looking to overburden staff resources, and then in their analysis of what type of expertise, that would be a conversation with the municipality to see what staff representatives would be most appropriate. And it would certainly be something that we would consider when selecting program participation and staff that would be, I'll say, eligible loosely to participate in the programming.
Thank you. Again, through you, Mr. Mayor, just one final question. So we would have a selection of programs, if I understand it, and then at that time, we would have a decision made as to what staffing would be required for a particular length of time. Is that how it would work? Thank you.
Executive Director.
Through Your Worship to Councillor Hamlin. So the FCM would put out a call to specific programs when they were looking for municipal partners on further international programming. And at that time, the town would do an assessment if that program is something that aligns with the type of work that we're doing and the staff capacity that's available at that time. And if so, then we would put our name forward to participate in that program. If a program call came out that did not align with our community-based strategic plan, we did not have the capacity to participate, then it wouldn't be a program that we would recommend participating in.
Thank you.
Council, any other questions or comments on this issue? Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I'll be supporting this. I like that everything I'd highlighted in this report is something that Executive Director Peg had emphasized during the presentation, that there's no direct budget impact, but mostly the list of I think it's 8 items under participation would provide the following benefits. I can't see how I could oppose any of them. It's an impressive list. So but I'm all in favor of this. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments, Council, before I call the vote on this? Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I'd be remiss if I just didn't comment what an excellent and insightful presentation that Executive Director Peg has just given in terms of the other side. My work is as a liaison, but the communities are the heart and soul of these international programs. I could list many, many Canadian municipalities who are participating annually, and I will too be supporting our participation in this as described by Executive Director Peg.
Thank you. So unless there's any other questions or comments, I think that the program as iterated offers a lot of opportunities for us. You think globally and act locally. This is a way for us to move the bar locally on a number of very important issues, from sustainability to accountable local government and driving our local economy. So I also will be supporting this. With that said, I will call the vote then. All in favor? And opposed? So noted. And I'm going to take us back now to item 7.1. And that's the item dealing with the community-based strategic plan and the Q2 operational plan. I neglected to get this on the floor, but also I neglected to invite public input. So Clerk Almus, can you ask if there's anyone in the audience who would like to address this item?
Thank you, Your Worship. If there's anybody from the public wishing to speak to the staff report regarding the community-based strategic plan and operational plan update, please press the raise your hand feature. And it doesn't look like there's anyone interested to speak to this matter at this time, Your Worship.
Thank you, Clerk. So I'll read in the resolution that staff report CAO 2021-11, 2021 progress report, community-based strategic plan, and Q2 operational plan be received for information. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that? Councillor Berman, Councillor Jeffrey. And I'll look one last time for any comments or questions before I call the vote. Seeing none, all in favor? That is received unanimously. Thank you. And this brings us to item 7.3, C 2021-14 procedural bylaw review and update. And I will pass this to Clerk Almas.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will review, we have a brief PowerPoint that will go through some of the highlights of the recommended changes to our procedure bylaw. And we'll just share our screen here. So while that's loading, just a bit of a preamble. So the background to the procedural bylaw is we received council direction on June the 21st to proceed with any recommended changes to a number of policy items, and one being the procedural bylaw. So we do interchangeably use procedural bylaw and procedure bylaw, but technically it is procedure bylaw. So if we go to the next slide. So consideration was given to the following during the review that we undertook for the last 2 months: maintaining good governance to its stakeholders as an accountable, transparent manner, consistent with the community-based strategic plan goal of being an accountable local government, increasing efficiencies and managing corporate priorities, providing council and the public ample opportunity to review agenda material and be informed prior to meetings, and ensuring the ability for public participation is maintained wherever possible. And again, a procedure bylaw is a requirement of the Municipal Act. All municipal councils are required to have it for their municipal boards, as well as their governing bodies. We also incorporate these procedures in effect for our advisory bodies as well. And it is purpose of a procedural bylaw is it governs the calling, the place, and proceedings for which meetings occur. So that is a bit of the background for council members, the public that are watching. So our next slide, we'll get into some of the recommendations. So presentations, council members / other business. So community announcements are to be brief, succinct, timely as verbal updates only. Members should direct the public to the website or respective departments for additional details. Other business allows council to provide updates to a meeting or event that they have attended where information may benefit council, staff, or public, or to ask questions of staff or raise a concern that requires direction. And again, part of this is we've considered community announcements and moving it to the end of meetings, but we are fully aware that a lot of the viewers tune on to our meetings or join our meetings from the beginning, and they generally are there to look at specific meeting material items of business. So we felt that we'd like to keep it at the beginning for that purpose, but limit it to verbal updates. So any sort of pictures, videos, whatnot, if a member of council wants items of that nature that requires a little bit more technical requirements and discussion, then we would incorporate that under other business. Questions should be posed to staff in advance of the meeting to allow them to efficiently address the matter. Council questions not requiring council direction should be posed directly to the CAO, department head, or customer service. Our next slide. This pertains to the general consent. So this is a new process that's being adopted by a number of municipalities across the province, where we will be looking at limiting consent agenda items to matters that are directly questioned to council that require council direction. Any sort of mass communications that are sent to municipalities across the province, or of more of a routine informational nature, will be all compiled in a correspondence listing that will be posted and updated regularly on our municipal website for members of council or the public. So if any member of council does note there's some piece of correspondence that should require, or they would like to request council direction on, then they would request that item be pulled and provided that notice to the clerk. And it would be referred to the appropriate standing committee for consideration first, unless it's time sensitive or the matter is not directly within the mandate of the standing committee. Our next slide pertains to roles and responsibilities. Currently, the bylaw describes the roles and responsibility. Again, this is something that's specific in the Municipal Act, can't be superseded. It's also identified within the Code of Conduct for Council Local Board Committee members, and staff recommend removing this duplication. As previously noted, the procedural bylaw is for the governing of the calling place and proceedings of council. So we feel that that just adds a necessary bulk basically within this bylaw. Staff also will recommend discontinuing the use of individual motion sheets as they are not required by the Municipal Act or Robert's Rules of Order and are not in line with the town's commitment to green initiatives. So for all of those that are not aware, currently we print off individual motion sheets once the motion is passed, becoming a resolution. It was generally signed by the mover, seconder, and the mayor and the clerk. And that is not a requirement. So we will not be preparing those even when we get back into chambers if council supports this recommendation. Again, part of that is that the official record of the meeting is the minutes, and that will be the formal documentation of the resolutions that were passed. Next slide. Speaks to the inaugural meeting. So since the recent changes to the Municipal Election Act has set the date in which council can start their term to November 15th. Previously, it was December the 1st, with the first meeting to be held within 31 days after its term. Staff are proposing amending the order of business for the inaugural meeting as well to be more neutral and allow some flexibility when set by the CAO, clerk, and mayor-elect. So the recommendation here is that section 4.1 be amended to allow the first meeting of a newly elected council after a regular election be held no earlier than the first Monday following November 15th at a date, time, and location to be determined by the newly elected mayor and clerk, not less than 31 days after its term commences. Next slide. Order of business. Provide for in-camera sessions to be held at the beginning of a council meeting with a proposed start time of 3 p.m. and move the general consent item to the end of the agenda to allow consideration of staff reports and deputations requiring public engagement at the beginning of the meetings. So again, this recommendation would be to move in-camera discussions to the beginning of the meetings. I'll talk a little bit further in the presentation about the process for that. And then the general consent item agenda be moved to the end of the meetings for those items that don't go on the website that we know that council direction is required. Next slide. Decorum. Knowing that we've identified a process within the procedural bylaw to have hybrid meetings and meetings that are electronic participation, such as right now, we feel that there should be a standard for decorum for these virtual meetings. And we've set out, these are quite common sense. However, it's just a reminder to council staff and the public that participate in meetings of what is expected of their participation. Next slide. Motions and voting on motions and recorded votes. The distinction between refer and defer has been formally clarified. So within the current version of our procedural bylaw, we only speak to deferrals. We don't speak to referrals. So we have provided a clarification, a definition. So again, an item that is referred back to staff or another committee or organization or other body to obtain information that may have been missing in the original report that could have a bearing on the outcome of the decision. So a motion to refer is amendable. A motion to defer an item is not amendable. To defer a motion means that the standing committee and or council generally have the information they need to make a decision, but may require more time to consider the information provided prior to making any sort of decision. We're also recommending, as a number of municipalities in Simcoe County are continuing as well, is continuing with the colored voting cards at the in-person meetings. It's been found beneficial from an accessibility perspective. And all of our meetings are streamed and available live, so it also helps for our viewers at home. Next slide. points of order or privilege. We're recommending that the CAO be permitted to call a point of privilege to address any actions or inappropriate comments directed at staff or from the public about staff or council, which one not be called by a member of council, and establishing a process for calling a point of personal privilege on behalf of another member. So when staff was requested to review changes to the procedure bylaw, one of the components was looking at items that have been previously communicated to council about best practice. And this is one that we had informally identified as a process that could be utilized. And we are recommending it be considered in the changes to the procedural bylaw. It is not normally a practice that is incorporated into parliamentary procedure, and having an individual that's outside of the assembly or body being able to call a point of privilege. But we feel that there could be merit in approving this modification to our own personal procedures here. Again, the recommendation is to change that as identified further in the staff report. Our next slide. Notice of motion. Notice of motion be provided to the clerk for inclusion on a standing committee agenda to allow the standing committee an opportunity to provide input prior to consideration by council. Notice to waive the procedure bylaw requirements in providing notice of motion be allowed if the matter is urgent and time will not permit the item to be discussed at a standing committee prior to council's consideration. Currently, the requirement to waive notice only requires a majority vote, and we're proposing that it requires 2/3 support. If notice is not waived for any reason, that motion would be included on the next regular meeting of council. With notice of motion to include a whereas sentence identifying how it aligns with the town's strategic plan or departmental budget priorities, and if not, explain why the matters should be a priority. And further to the recent presentation from CAO Skinner about our operational plan and our community-based strategic plan, that does set together with our budget business plan documents, set the priorities for the year. And we feel that there may be merit in identifying within a resolution so that your fellow colleagues and staff and the public are fully aware how that aligns and why you feel it is a priority to potentially push another item that's been identified as a priority potentially further down the road. Resolutions will be circulated to municipal advocacy organizations as appropriate, AMO, FCM, AMCTO, et cetera, unless the resolution pertains to a specific limited number of municipalities. As you're aware, and we have seen, I believe on this agenda was 6.4 was an item that is a bulk circulation. So there's a number of municipalities that are getting out of the process and procedure of submitting all of their comments around the province for approval. However, we feel that with the consent agenda, having that ability, the correspondence listing, that those organizations we will still accept and include on that consent listing that were posted publicly, but we're recommending for our own purposes that our council resolutions are primarily promoted to the appropriate government agency or the municipal advocacy organizations. Next slide. Bylaws. To allow for some flexibility, staff are proposing a minor housekeeping amendment by replacing the word shall with may when including bylaws on the agenda. So the recommendation is that the first sentence of section 4.24, the procedure bylaw, be amended as follows. All bylaws may be enacted in a single motion. This is again an opportunity for some meeting efficiencies, primarily when we're looking at appointment bylaws for the various committees or boards. We're looking at appointment of various officers. In addition to any other bylaw, again, it can be included as basically a consent item with all the bylaws included in it. And if a member wishes to have one of those pulled and voted on separately, they can request through the chair to have it pulled, and they don't require a seconder. Next slide. Locations of meetings. So further to the guidelines provided through the health unit to encourage working from home and meeting virtually wherever possible to reduce the spread of COVID. We're suggesting a hybrid in-person virtual meeting remain a consideration, but challenges around technology, separation requirements, retrofitting the council chambers, and accessibility requirements are still being considered. So we've been working on a number of changes actually since July. We believe that we do have a plan in place that could get us into at least a hybrid situation. But at this point, we're recommending that we continue to hold the meetings virtually until January 2022. And if council chooses to move to a hybrid solution prior to the January 2022 timeline, then we can do so because we put in appropriate parameters within the procedure bylaw. Next slide. Form of notice. Currently, the agenda publishing deadline is 120 hours prior to a meeting that takes place. Since being implemented, addendums to these agendas have been increasing significantly. I believe in the past year, we've had 23 different addendums. Questions of council do continue to be received the day of the meeting. I shouldn't say in most part, actually, this we received a few questions, and I think all the questions that I received pertaining to our reports was actually received over the weekend, which is appropriate and what staff recommend. Should the proposed publishing deadline of 4 days prior to the meeting be approved, staff would continue to endeavor to have the meeting agenda material available in advance of the proposed deadline, however, request the flexibility and lessen the pressure on staff to have an additional day if necessary. So for our normal meetings on Mondays, what this means is we have to publish by the Wednesday afternoon. We're not, we rarely, if any, receive any questions that evening on a Wednesday evening. So to give us an extra day and have it published on Thursday provides still, we believe council and the public ample opportunity to review the agenda prior to the meeting time. So we're requesting that flexibility. Next slide. Form of meeting notice. So the current notice requirement of all other committees and boards and the procedure bylaw is 24 hours. So again, for any of our advisory committees, including the BIA, Police Services Board, right now it's stipulated at 24 hours, and we respectfully agree that it should be changed. Doesn't give the public nor members of the body very much time to review the details of the agenda package that is provided and be able to be prepared for the discussion at the meeting. So we are requesting that change from 24 hours to 48. Next slide. Schedules B, C, and D relating to meeting times. We're also recommending, as we can see with this meeting, usually our SIC meetings are very full, but they are generally intense with corporate matters that are a strategic priority. Hence, the need for all of council for detailed, thorough discussions. So we're recommending changing the corporate community services standing committee meetings to begin in the afternoon at 2 o'clock and moving the SIC meetings to 5 p.m. And then the D&O or Development Operations Services Standing Committee remain the second Monday of the month. Next slide. In-camera meetings, as mentioned earlier, we're recommending in-camera meetings if necessary. They're currently held at the end of the meeting, which can be lengthy and can pose some challenges with regards to legal costs and staff overtime, as well as any sort of conversation that happens in camera. It's in camera because it's sensitive, important information, and we want council to be fully prepared and fresh to review the details and the information that direction that may be required from an in-camera meeting. So staff are proposing moving this to the start of a meeting at 3 o'clock, with a recess being called after the in-camera session has concluded until 5 p.m. when the regular business listed on the agenda would start. Should an in-camera business not be concluded by the regular open meeting start time at 5 p.m., council may continue the in-camera session following the regular business has been dealt with, or postpone it to a future meeting. Next slide. Continuing on the in-camera, so in-camera may occur at both standing committee meetings and council meetings, but staff recommend that they take place at council meetings if possible. But we didn't want to remove that in case there wasn't necessary opportunities that the standing committee should address a matter before it progresses to full council. So we've kept that in, but recommend it be focused at council meetings. Should an in-camera session be deemed necessary at a standing committee meeting, the minutes of that in-camera session should be ratified by council prior to any action being taken. Our next slide. To reduce the requirement to move in camera, staff propose including a formal motion on the public agenda to accept the provided in-camera materials, including any staff recommendation that obviously meet the limited requirements of approvals that can occur in an in-camera session. Should a member wish to discuss an item, 24 hours notice shall be provided to the clerk to have the meeting occur at the 3 o'clock time, pending quorum can be established. If no request is received, then the meeting would begin at the scheduled time of 5 p.m. with no closed session. So this process is a process similar to what the county follows. If there is no request to have the information pulled from an in-camera item, if it's mostly informational or requires simple direction or instruction to staff or agents such as a solicitor in camera, which are the only limited items that can be approved by resolution in camera, then we request not even moving in camera, approving it unless a member of council wishes to have further discussion. Then we would obviously move in camera to make sure that all the information that a member of council needs to receive is provided prior to making any sort of decision. Our next slide. These were some general recommendations that we included at the end of the report regarding, again, basically decorum. Members should not interrupt another member without the consent of the chair by requesting to speak unless they make a point of order or point of privilege. The chair is responsible for controlling the discussion to ensure effective meeting management. If a member is absent from the meeting, the member loses their right to debate and vote on the motion. This has come up in the past that if they are absent from a meeting, there has been or there could be requests for statements to be read out by individual members of council or their comments, reported on publicly. However, they lose their right to enter into that debate on the motion should they be not in attendance at the meeting. And absences and regrets for a meeting shall be reported to the chair and the clerk. Currently, it only requires notice be provided to the clerk, and we recommend for all of our committees, boards, and council that the chair also be notified. Next slide. So I do have one more I noticed that was not included in here. We also provided a provision within the staff report pertaining to where at this point by law enforcement services, as they're reporting to fire services, reports under, normally they would report under DNO, but now that they're under fire services temporarily, that they report through the corporate community services. So we want to include some flexibility within the bylaw that should a department reorganization happen, that automatically we can update the mandate of the various standing committee to include that department or division within the appropriate standing committee. Just for full transparency, I did receive a few questions in advance of this meeting. I just want to make sure I touched on them all. Yes, I had a question prior to this meeting about if we do have an in-camera session that occurs prior to the 5 p.m. start time. So if it starts at 3 o'clock, we should be moving the declarations of conflict of interest prior to that in-camera session, because a member could have a conflict pertaining to an in-camera matter. So we'll make sure that any sort of tweaks that are required to the bylaw reflect that when it comes back to council on September the 20th. There was a question about putting in the preparation of an agenda. At the end of the paragraph, they talked about whether there should be a check-in about various events or correspondence that's received after a certain time. And staff will endeavor to provide any sort of correspondence from the community to members of council or the standing committee or the board or advisory committee in advance of the meeting. Once it's received, we'll try and get it to the members as soon as possible. And if at any point correspondence is received later, that members be provided the time to appropriately review the material prior to making a decision, or they have the ability to defer the recommendation to a future meeting should they wish to further review that correspondence or clarification. There was an item 2.9 request for clarification. It says for clarification requirements that correspondence be sent to the CAO or supervisor in accordance with our communications protocol and staff relations, council staff relations policy, that it should state the CAO or department head. It shouldn't state supervisor, so we'll be making that adjustment as well. And a question was about municipal services boards. So municipal services boards must follow this procedure bylaw unless they adopt their own procedures, which they do have the ability and authority to do so. And I think that captures all of the comments. So.
Thank you, Clerk Almus. And I guess we'll start off. It's a lengthy report. We covered a lot of ground there to see if there's anyone from the audience, any of our residents would like to comment on this report.
Certainly, if there's a member of the audience that wishes to participate and provide their comments on this report, please press the raise your hand feature at the bottom of your screen. And it doesn't look like anybody is interested in addressing this report at this time, Your Worship.
Thank you, Sarah. There's a lot of ground to cover here at Council. So I think what I might do before I actually put anything on the floor is go around for questions or comments. And then we will do is put the motion on the floor, and we will ask for a list to sever if anyone is proposing an amendment to any specific item, and then go through on that basis. So I'm just first going to open the floor for questions and comments. And I'll start with you, Councillor Jeffrey, and then Councillor McLeod.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. I don't have a lot. Still in the bigger picture, I don't think for me, because council's part-time, as committed as I am, it just doesn't matter with my self-employment. When you set the deadline for, I am not going to get to a thorough review of our meeting packages until the weekend. So it makes me feel like I shouldn't send staff any questions. I'll just ask them at the meeting. I do love to give heads up. And if I do, I say to them, I don't need the answer till the meeting, because I don't want to go through the whole. I really honestly feel that we're still on the edge of running a meeting behind the meeting. And I know tonight that the clerk included some of the questions that had been asked over the weekend and the day into the presentation to hone it a bit. But I still believe that we're developing information out of the public realm over the course of time between when it's published and when we talk about it. And to have an understanding of how we get there for the public is important. So I don't know how we fix this in this, but those are just my comments as an observation overall. I'm not going to be able to change my time as to when I do my work, but I will be as courteous and respectful of staff's time as I can be going forward. I really liked the changes to the notice of motions to generate them at the relevant committees, so discussion happens at the committee before it gets to council. And I think you've done a stellar job in trying to address that bit of a loophole. And then the last thing I'll comment on, because I know some of my colleagues have a lot of questions, is this is the most adverse reaction I've had to something in a very long time in our procedure, and that's to include the CAO in our process. And for all the reasons you described as to why to do it, for me were reasons not to. It's up to the chair to do that. All of a sudden, we don't want our chair trying to manage something between staff and a presenter. It's just anywhere in national governance or anything I do, it's not even been contemplated or considered. I honestly believe that that would not be a good move for us. And I don't think it increases our accountability or our transparency. I think that the CAO could comment to the chair after if she believes for any reason they didn't address it appropriately, but I just don't honestly believe that there's a staff role in our legislative meetings for reacting or bringing up personal points of privilege on behalf of staff. I think that has to be the chair, and the chair has to be strong on it. So those are my comments so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I do have, I think, somewhere around a dozen questions that I did send in this morning and did not expect an answer to except at this time. And a bunch of them are about some stuff inside this report that and changes that to the actual wording of the procedural bylaw, which do not align with one another. For example, on item number 4.14 in the actual text, proposed new text of the procedural bylaw, it says that members may speak only once to an item. However, item 4.10 says speak once until every member who wishes to speak has spoken once. Well, those are very different things. And I think that I can make an argument for either one of them, frankly. I feel as though there's some contradiction between the actual text of the procedural bylaw and some of the appendices. For example, in the actual text of the appendices, delegations are required to ask to attend 5 days in advance. But item number 4.12 in the text of the procedural bylaw draft says delegations are required to ask to attend 48 hours before publication of an agenda. Those don't actually add up to the same thing. One of those is 6 days and one of those is 5 days, and possibly 7, depending on what else we decide to do today. I feel as though those two timelines should also align. And also, there's something missing in Schedule A, item 9. There's no timeline for notice for an in-camera meeting specified, whereas we're talking about 4 days versus 5 days or 120 hours or whatever it is that we're deciding. And I feel as though there should be a timeline on that as well. And there's a couple of other things that I would like to see included as changes to our procedural bylaw. And I wonder if I wonder if there's a way. Well, I know that there's a way. I would like to refer this report, but I don't want to do that just yet because I want to hear what other members of this committee have to say. But I will warn you that I am going to be asking for a referral for more information. And just a heads up on that. What I think has happened for me anyway in the last 3 years, I have attended other people's council meetings through some other stuff that I do, and many councils do things very differently than Collingwood does, and some of them are better. And I would like to avail myself of the opportunity to provide that feedback for us. And I feel like the mayor attends county and the deputy mayor attends county, and they have different ways of doing things as well. And some of those may be superior to what we've ever contemplated. And I know that Executive Director Peg has been in Innisfil for a long time, and they may have different procedures as well. And so I feel like we could possibly wrap our arms around this as a group and come up with something even more stellar than this report, because there's a whole lot in here I totally agree with. There's just a few things that I would like to see additionally changed. For example, the discussion regarding the striking committee. I feel as though there's room for some clarification there, and so on and so forth. So those are my comments right now, but I will be moving to refer this back to staff for consultation with council, and not forever, just for a month. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McLeod. Councillor, any other questions, comments? Councillor Comey, and then Councillor Hamlin.
Mr. Mayor, through to Clerk Almas. Clerk Almas, could you kindly expand on the notion of if a member is absent, they cannot vote on a motion that was presented at that meeting? Am I understanding that correctly?
Clerk Almas?
Certainly through your worship to Councillor Comey. So if a member is absent from the meeting, that they lose their ability to vote and debate on a motion.
Okay, so for further, through you, Mr. Mayor, further clarification, let's say Councillor Doherty is not here. So anything, this particular example, she's not here presently. So are we saying any motions contained in today's agenda, she would not be able to, or a member would not be able to vote on because of their absence? Is that correct?
Clerk Almas?
Thank you, Your Worship. So Councillor Doherty, if she is absent, or any of the members that are absent would not have the ability to vote. Sorry, they don't have the ability to vote at the meeting that they're absent to. So any sort of recommendations that arrive out of a standing committee meeting that goes to council, they would have the ability to vote there. But if we were at a council meeting, they lose their ability to vote on the final resolution.
I see. So you can't vote if you are absent. That's what it's saying. Not if something comes up. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just trying to clear. If something comes up and you're not at a committee meeting, but you can still vote on it at council, you're not getting your right to be included. Okay, wonderful. I appreciate that clarification. That concerned me greatly. Thank you very much.
Councillor Hamlin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thanks to staff for the hard work on all these items. I had a question relating to two of the matters that you indicated, and this is through you, Mr. Mayor, to Clerk Almas, that would go to standing committee agendas. And one was if consent correspondence on the consent item was asked to be pulled. And the other was for notices of motion. And so both of those was suggested would go to the appropriate standing committee. What happens if the council member who's asking the matter be pulled or wishes to bring the notice of motion is not on the standing committee where the matter would be directed to? How do they participate?
Clerk Almas?
Certainly. So that is a good question through your worship to Councillor Hamlin. So we're recommending it go to the most time sensitive, go to the standing committee for a formal, for an informal conversation regarding it, the matter that's being discussed before it comes to council. So there is some consideration at the standing committee meeting. If you're not a member of that standing committee, then you would have to wait till the matter came back to council for any sort of consideration. But we did provide some flexibility that if it is time sensitive in nature, that it can come directly to council.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So if I wish to bring a notice of motion to have something to do with one of our parks, just to help me understand this. So it would go to the committee that I'm not sitting on. Would I add myself as a deputation to that committee? How do I bring my motion forward in that circumstance?
Sarah?
Certainly through your worship. So members of council can appear as a deputation before another committee. And then that would be your opportunity to express the reason why you wanted to support that. Then the committee would discuss it. So you wouldn't be doing any sort of vote or recommendation for it being referred to the council meeting, but you could plead the reason why you find it's a priority or important for council to consider.
Okay, thank you. I understand what the procedure would be. I do agree with the remarks of Councillor Jeffrey about that it's inappropriate for our CAO to be commenting on personal points of privilege that would allege bad behavior on behalf of members of the public or our council. And I do agree that that really is in the hands of our chair. Or alternatively, if staff feels they have an issue, there's likely a route through the code of conduct to get a resolution. On the remote meetings, in terms of the location of the meetings, I totally understood the discussion in the staff report, but through you, Mr. Mayor, I have a question of Clerk Almas. There may be occasions where a council member would like to participate remotely. It may be a health matter that, they just don't want to, don't have the ability to come to the council table, but would like to participate, or there's a family obligation that means they can't be in attendance. Is it possible technically to have individual councillors on a one-off basis participate remotely?
Clerk Almus?
Certainly through your worship to Councillor Hamlin, it is doing a hybrid sort of meeting, does have a different set of complexities to dealing with it. This has been a big discussion amongst a number of my peer clerks and their review of hybrid meetings. And this seemed to be the process recommended by many of our counterparts, particularly in Simcoe County. But could it be, if council wants to have that change to allow that flexibility, council can make that recommendation.
Thank you. And my last comment, Mr. Mayor, through you, is on the publishing of the date of the agendas. And I did read the staff report carefully on that about and I think what we saw is staff's issues about having the deadline and why they wanted as much time as possible to prepare the agenda before the meeting. But I feel that there needs to be a balancing of staff needs with the needs of council and of the community. And I just wondering how we can best take this into account. I know as a council member, if I'm reading an agenda, I want to read it, I want to think about it, I might want to ask staff a question, I might want to reach out to the community or someone who's building or whatever and say, are you aware this is on the agenda? Do you want to comment? What do you think about that? I may want to do a little research, and then I might want to prepare some remarks. And I also find that our builder community and our residents are struggling with the same thing as well. And, I know we've all received all of the emails from those residents who are concerned about potential changes to the Cranberry Golf Course. And some of the biggest issues I've spoken to people about have to do with when is this going to be on an agenda and how will we have enough time to decide who's going to make the remarks and what to say in response. And, there's just not enough time. So I want to know, is there flexibility in terms of staff needs to give, more what I'll say business days to council and our community to deal with what's on an agenda? I know we started off our terms, we got our agendas Friday evening, and then we moved to Wednesday. This is squishing it back to Thursday. You might recall my own view is, there's no reason why we shouldn't all have a week. I mean, these aren't secretive things. We shouldn't be feeling pressured to hurry to decisions, and we should be consulting with our community, and our community should have a chance to reach out to us and say, this is what I think. So I just, through you, Mr. Mayor, my question, I guess, of Clerk Almus is, how much of a problem is this for staff, and is there a middle ground here?
Clerk Almus?
Certainly through your worship to Councillor Hamlin. I agree. We used to publish it on Fridays, and we went to the time on Wednesdays. We do provide, I'd have to go back and review our peer municipalities, but we provided more, we previously provided more time than most municipalities did provide. I'd have to do some research before the next meeting to confirm that. And we wondered basically that if council wasn't in dire need of the agenda on a Wednesday evening, if they could make do with it being posted on a Thursday, that would alleviate some pressures. But this is, the procedural bylaw is really what you're governed by. So, we take your input, we provide some expertise and some guidance to some best practices. We try new things. It is a living document. So it's whatever council ultimately at the end of the day wants to recommend.
Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions. Thanks.
All right, Council, are there any other preliminary comments or questions before I put the motion or the resolution on the floor? I think what we'll do is put the resolution on the floor, and then I will go back to Councillor McLeod, given her earlier statement. Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. This was a question, I guess, through you to the CAO or the clerk in regards to Councillor McLeod's pending request for a referral. Is there any downside to that? We're not on any sort of a time constraints with this. Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right, so the resolution reads for item 7.3 that staff report C 2021-14 procedural bylaw review and update be received and council approve the recommendations contained herein. And the council further enact and pass a bylaw to replace procedural bylaw number 2019-75 that will incorporate the procedural bylaw recommendations and consolidate previous amendments. And I'll look for a mover and a seconder just to get that on the floor. I've got Councillor Berman and Councillor Jeffrey, and then I will pass it back to Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. And I'm making a motion to refer this report back to staff to gather input and recommendations from council regarding these proposed amendments and additional suggestions regarding the procedural bylaw in general for inclusion in a future report.
Okay, do you have a timeline for that report, whether it be October 1 or November 1 or successive SIC meetings, I would say?
Yeah, when I think the next SIC meeting, this shouldn't be a complicated, I don't think, thing. And I know we have a lot coming up, so the sooner we can get it out of the way, the better. So I think October would be fine. I already have thoughts gathered.
All right, and I saw Councillor Jeffrey is prepared to second this. And I thought just maybe a question then for Clerk Almas and maybe CAO Skinner is in terms of the process to gather feedback or suggestions from council, what's the best way for that to be done? Go ahead, Clerk Almas.
Certainly, Your Worship. I think that it's a great suggestion, and I'll just add to it. We can circulate an email about the appropriate process and timelines to all members of council. And again, this is out there in the public forum as well. So if there's any comments from the public that they may wish to submit to us, by all means, please do that. And I do know that Collingwood does do things a little bit different, but keep in the back of your mind that a lot of meeting efficiencies that happen in other municipalities is they consolidate a lot more information. And really the just as I started this procedural bylaw presentation today was about being as open and transparent with information. So we do have longer processes for certain things. So just as long as we, ensure that accountability, transparency is at the paramount. I'll leave it at that. And then we'll circulate information to council members tomorrow. And I do appreciate all the feedback. This is how you're going to be governing yourselves, obviously with the clerk's department assistance. So I appreciate the feedback.
Well, thank you, Sarah, and well said. Those are important points. And I appreciate this has been a big report, and the procedural bylaws are critical procedural roadmap for how we govern council meetings, standing committee meetings, and everything between the gavel coming down and adjournment. So it's a very important process, and it's one I know that you've been gathering information for a while. So we got a mover and a seconder, a motion for referral. There are comments or debate if anyone wishes to make any comments. Seeing none, then I will call the vote then. All in favor? And that is carried unanimously. Thank you. And thank you, Sarah, for biting this and chewing off this large piece of change for us. This brings us to 7.4 T 2021-14 Asset Sale Proceeds Part 2 Reserve Fund Policies. And I think that is Treasurer Quinlan, but I've lost in my paper. So hopefully I've got that right, Monica. So go ahead, please. We've got our audio issues. unfortunately, again.
How's this?
That's better. We can hear you.
Okay, great. I don't know why it really hates me when I'm in office. Thank you, Your Worship, and through you. As outlined in the staff report, this is a follow-up on the original asset sale proceeds decision we made back in March, where amounts were allocated to 4 newly created funds. And staff committed at that time to create policies associated with each of those funds to ensure the amounts were used in the manner that members of council intended as part of that significant decision. So the report starts with the Collingwood Greening Legacy Fund, which amounts to about $1 million. And to summarize, the most important aspects of this fund is more awareness of environmental issues, creating green spaces by adding vegetation, trees, and plant-based products, incorporating green products and processes into homes, but generally, essentially looking at conservation efforts, adding a greening impact to current projects, reducing GHG or greenhouse gases, and creating more energy efficient spaces and places. The second fund that was created was the Collingwood Arts and Culture Legacy Fund, which 1.5 million was allocated out of the asset sale for this fund. And the incentive for this fund came from the results of the public survey with a large amount of support for a fund dedicated to support for arts, culture, and theater in the community. And as members of council are aware, the town is currently undergoing an arts center feasibility study. The goal of this study is to evaluate the needs of the arts and cultural sectors in the community. And this reserve fund has been put in place so that it may address the results of that need. The third one is fairly self-explanatory, but is the Collingwood Hospital Redevelopment Fund, and it amounts to $2 million. At this point in time, the way staff have addressed this is that these funds would be invested to assist in growing the amount so that when the money is required by the hospital for redevelopment, it could be used to go towards that. The final fund is the Collingwood Multi-Use Facility Fund, and it amounts to $3 million. And again, as council is aware, this project is a long-range plan, and it has been initiated so that the funding will be available once those plans are solidified. I think that sums up the basis of all the reserve funds. And
thank you, Treasurer Quinlan. And Clerk Almus, I'll look to you to see if there is anyone in our audience that would like to comment on this report.
Certainly, thank you, Your Worship. To all our attendees, if you wish to speak, please press the raise your hand feature. And there's nobody wishing to address this report at this time.
Okay, thank you. So then I will read in the resolution for 7.4 that staff report T2021-14 asset sale proceeds part 2 reserve fund policies be received, and further that the Collingwood Greening Legacy Fund, the Collingwood Arts and Culture Legacy Fund, the Collingwood Hospital Redevelopment Fund policies, and the Collingwood Multi-Use Facility Fund as attached as appendices A, B, C, and D be adopted by council. Can I get a mover and a seconder, please? Moved by Councillor Berman, seconded by Councillor Hamlin. Council, questions or comments on these items? Councillor Berman.
Thank you, Mayor Sunderson. Just a minor, what I hope it goes without saying, but through you to the treasurer, at the end of number 3, the hospital fund, you talk about that it's long-term, so investing, but that line isn't included in the multi-use facility fund, which is also long-term. Is that, can I assume it's the same concept, or? Treasurer Quinlan?
For you, Your Worship. You are correct, Councillor Berman. Likely should have included that as part of the discussion, but for sure the funds would be invested until we need them.
Okay, thank you. I thought it went without saying, but I thought I'd better say it.
Thank you. Council, any questions or comments? Seeing none, I have one. It's also on the hospital fund. Treasurer Quinlan, it says under utilization of funds, contribution to operating fund. And I'm wondering if that should also include capital because it's part of the redevelopment dollars. I just wouldn't want to cross wires there.
Through you, Your Worship. because it's not our actual capital project, I didn't think capital needed to be included, but happy to update that if
Well, and just, I guess, for clarification, because we may, certainly in the discussions we've been having with the hospital, they're looking for capital dollars for the redevelopment and not necessarily for the operation either of the application process or of the hospital. So I just wanted to keep that consistent.
we could do that update for sure.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Jeffrey, you had your card up briefly. Did you have anything to add to that?
It got solved. It was just clarifying between our operating, the need for it to be in our operating budget for their capital budget.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, unless there's any other questions or comments, and I'm not seeing any, I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. This brings us to item 7.5. A very important item, and this is the front end of that process, and that's the from T 2021-16 2022 budget preliminary status report for discussion. I will pass this to Treasurer Quinlan.
Thank you, Your Worship. As Council is aware, the preparations for the 2022 budget have begun, and this is a very preliminary look at how we will be proceeding. So far, we have had 2 workshops with department heads and managers and collected information and details where there are major variations from the 2021 operational plans and any major changes to the 10-year capital plan. Additionally, staff have launched a public survey to start the conversation and in collecting some initial public input on the 2022 budget, and more on that to come at the next SIC meeting. Again, I want to state that it's important to note that this report is the very, very first step in the process that leads to that final budget. It includes very preliminary information, and I know I keep saying very, known at this time. The report is intended to simply stimulate the discussion and provide members of council with a context in which to have the discussion, mindful of the challenges the town will be facing for the 2022 budget. As stated in the report, the current market conditions have the CPI for Ontario at 3.5%, where energy prices have increased most significantly. And moreover, the non-residential building construction price index has increased by 7.7% year over year as well, which is a significant contribution. The town has continued to see growth over the last year, and at this point in time, MPAC has listed our assessment growth to be 1.75%, with one more supplemental billing expected. But as council may be aware, it's known that at this point, the phase-in assessment value will remain the same as 2021 for the 2022 taxation year, with MPAC starting the revaluation for 2023. Based on the current market conditions, staff predict that costs will be increasing between 1.5% to 3%. And this is largely due to the impacts of the NRV CPI and the CPI increases, which we just discussed. These impact how far the town's dollar will stretch for 2022 and have both an impact on us as well as our residents and taxpayers. We have some other factors of concern, including the updated asset management plan, which will be provided at the next SIC meeting in October. There's been many council resolutions that have occurred throughout 2021 that should be incorporated in the 2022 budget. There's been a market review of the salary grid, and of course, finally, any ongoing impacts of COVID-19, and especially due to the variants and how they might impact our operations over the next year. Today, staff are proposing a 3% increase to start to the operating portion of the 2022 budget. And this would mean an increase of just over $1 million over the 2021 levy and would translate to a tax rate increase of less than 1%. Again, I really want to reiterate that this is a very preliminary, and staff are committed to prepare a budget that meets both council's direction and moves it forward in achieving its vision for the community. And I think that's about sums up the staff report.
Thank you very much, Treasurer Quinlan. Clerk Almus, is there anyone from our gallery that would like to speak to this matter?
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, raise your hand feature if you wish to speak to the staff report. And there's no request at this time to speak to this item.
All right, then I'll read in the resolution. That is that staff report T 2021-16 2022 budget preliminary status report for discussion be received, and further that direction be provided to staff with respect to a guideline for an estimated tax rate increase for 2022. Can I get a mover and a seconder for that, please? Councillor Berman, Councillor Hamlin. Council, questions or comments on the report? Councillor Jeffrey and then Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So I think we need to come up with a simple statement for the public so they understand the difference between the 3% and bringing in a tax increase of under 1% and how we get there, because I'm just reading media's headlines tomorrow saying staff proposed tax increases of 3% or something. I think we set ourselves up last year in terms of the mega hiring we did. We referred to the salary grid and those changes. I'm not sure we had a handle on those for this budget when we did it. So I think I am going to have to vote against the 3% change. I'm still vacillating and depending on if someone else has something else to say, but I really do think we may need to make this clear for the public as to what it is we're asking staff to do going forward.
I agree with you, Council. And I know at county, what we've generally done for the budget process is we set sort of a target or an assumption. So, and it doesn't deal so much with the levy because that's sometimes confusing. I agree with you. It usually deals with the tax rate. So what they've done at county for this 2022 budget is asked it to come in at a 2% or start with a 2% assumption. And that is a starting point. So it has to be very clear that this is not setting the budget. This is setting the discussions for around the budget. And so as Treasurer Quinlan indicated, we're looking at somewhere under, slightly under 1%. So maybe council wants to say we want to come back with a rate, projected rate increase of 1% or less. That kind of information, understanding that when we start to roll up our sleeves, that can change dramatically based on what we think we need and where we are right now and our projections moving forward. And as indicated, certainly the inflation rates are extremely volatile depending on the sector and how they impact the community. So those things, there's a lot in the air. But I think what we're looking for in this motion, and I'll look to Treasurer Quinlan to confirm, is a starting point, is basically setting that ballpark number to start our discussions and to generate public discussion as we go through the number of iterations from drafts 1, 2, and 3 to December. So I'll look to Treasurer Quinlan just to see if that's what your staff is looking for.
Yes, Your Worship, that's exactly what we're looking for. Just a very a guideline right now to start the discussions and allow us to start to work through the priorities for the 2022 fiscal year.
All right. So with that being said, I'll look around the table, and Clerk Almost, you have your card up. Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, there's, I think Treasurer Quinlan wasn't sure if the resolution that was read out was this, what was proposed. So I'm just wondering if you could just reread the motion for me.
Oh, yes, I've read it off the agenda, and I think it was the current one. It says that staff report T21-16 2022 budget preliminary status report for discussion be received, and further that direction be provided to staff with respect to a guideline for an estimated tax rate increase for 2022.
So thank you, Your Worship. There was an update sent actually that same day. So you must have got right on that and had it printed. So what the motion actually, as published in the public agenda, is that the staff report be received, council endorsed, the budget planning schedule is outlined, and further that the operating portion of the 2022 budget be capped at 3% above the 2021 operating budget, and any excess will be budgeted into capital assets, renewal projects, depleted reserves, and reserve funds.
Okay, all right, well, that changes the discussion a bit. So was that 3% referring to the levy or the tax rate?
Levy. So I would agree if we, that if we wanted to be very clear that maybe it should be sticking to the tax rate itself.
Right, okay.
Agreed.
So then, Councillor Jeffrey, you're nodding. Maybe you want to take a first stab and Ken will go around the table with it.
Well, I guess I would just ask, sorry. I have to read this off my iPad separately. And further that maybe council directs staff to bring in a tax rate under 1%, tax rate increase of 1% or less, noting the operating portion of the 2022 budget would be capped at 3% above the other. If we feel we need to do it all, otherwise I'd be quite happy to amend it just to that council direct staff to bring the budget tax rate 1% or less.
Okay, good, thank you. So that's an amendment, and if I can get a seconder, then we'll put that one on the floor. Is there a seconder, please? Councillor McLeod. All right, council, questions or comments on the amendment? Councillor McLeod.
Thank you. I'm trying to remember off the top of my pointed little head exactly what our tax increase was last year.
We were zero.
And I thank you. That's what I thought. Thank you. And my second question, not about the amendment, but shall I wait then?
No, go ahead.
I'm assuming that since we have a shiny new treasurer, that she may have different ways of doing things than we are used to. And I wonder if she could maybe articulate a little bit about what it is we might expect. Because in previous years, we've received a if X, then Y plus Z plus Q, and 3 different columns of if you do a 1% increase, it's this, and if you include this, and if you include this. Are you planning to stick to that regime, or are we going to be getting used to something entirely new? Through you, Mr. Mayor.
Yes.
Through you, Your Worship. I will be honest and say I haven't reviewed exactly everything that has been brought forward in the past, but I would say that I am going to try and stick to the previous, presentations as much as possible so that there isn't as much change. We do have a new budget software that's in place, and we've just recently started using, so I don't want to change a whole lot, albeit there will be some tweaks. We have I do have a little bit of a different way of maybe presenting things, and hopefully I can live up to what was there, but I do think we are going to try and stick to last year as much as possible, just to keep everybody from guessing, I suppose.
That assists, Councillor.
It does. And so just to be absolutely clear on my first question, our increase last year was less than 1%.
It was zero.
With 0.6 or something, no? Yeah.
No, I think it was zero. The year before we were around the hover under 1, I think, or maybe just over. But we were zero last year, given the COVID and everything we've been through.
Thank you.
Councillor, any other questions or comments on the amendment? Seeing none, then I will call the vote on the amendment. All in favor? That is carried unanimously. Thank you. And we'll go back to the main motion. Subject to the amendment. So the main motion as amended. Any questions or comments on that? I've got Councillor Comey and then Councillor Ham.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Treasurer Quinlan. Just a quick question, please, and I apologize if I missed it. I know the town put out a call for public input on the budget. And again, perhaps I didn't see it. Is there somewhere in that timeline that council can anticipate seeing some of that feedback from the public?
Treasurer.
For you, Your Worship. Yes, there is. We're collecting data and we're hoping to collect it to the end of or mid to end of September. So it would likely be either the October SIC or the late special October SIC that we'd like to put in place, that you'll see the results of that.
Follow.
Okay. Yeah, please. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Well, I suppose through you, then maybe I'll redirect to CAO Skinner, perhaps. And then since so many families are back in town now and hopefully selling to routine, maybe it'd be great to put out that call for input again. I feel like it's been maybe a couple of weeks since I saw it as a reminder. It's just a thought. I think we all agree it's an important part of the process. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor or CAO Skinner.
Thank you, through your worship, to Councillor Comey. I think that's a wonderful idea. I have no concerns whatsoever with putting out that call again. One thing that Treasurer Quinlan was mentioning this morning, actually, to department heads, and the Clerk Almus was commenting as well. We'd like to make sure that people have great opportunities to input, and we're contemplating options such as coffees with council, even virtual, to make sure that council members were also able to hear those types of comments directly, and had a good chance to take the community's temperature and be fully informed prior to the budget votes this year. So we haven't made any firm suggestions to council yet, but Councillor Comey, your suggestion is along the lines of some stuff we were percolating this morning on the budget front. Thank you.
That's awesome. Good to hear. Thank you.
Councillor Hamlin.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a question through you to Director Sloma, and I really ask it so the public has the answer. And it was something I noticed during the summer when a few times I was on my bike. Okay, I confess it was only a few times, but some of the grates on the streets aren't aligned to be safe for bicycles. And then I was informed by someone in our community that there was a plan. Part of the capital plan was to replace all of the grates over time. And so I asked Director Slama if that would be included in the budget this year. And I'm hoping she could just tell our public about that. Thank you.
Director Slama.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the mayor to Councillor Hamlin. Yes, staff have been in discussion with the Trails and Active Transportation Advisory Committee about changing some of the grates over the catch basins, so they're bike-friendly grates. And we had hoped to do some of that work through our existing operational budget and tasks. But this year in 2022, we haven't replaced any yet. So this year for the 2022 budget, we are bringing forward an item so that we have a budget dedicated for that, and including that, if it's appropriate, as a task within our operational plan for a bit more accountability on the follow through with that.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
All right, any other questions or comments, council, on the main motion as amended on the budget? Seeing none, then I'm going to call the vote then. All in favor? That is passed unanimously. Thank you. Council, we are at 4:58. So I'm going to look maybe to the clerk and to our chair of the Corporate and Community Services, Councillor McLeod, just to, we've got the 8.1 Q2 financial update, potentially any other business, and then public delegations. So I think my feeling would be that we push ahead and finish today to get it done, but I just want to make sure we're all on the same page. Okay, all right. So thank you. So that brings us then to departmental updates, and 8.1 is the Q2 financial update, and Treasurer Quinlan, it's your ball again.
Thank you, Your Worship. I do have a presentation to come up. Great, thank you. So as promised back in May, we are trying to, or what staff have been committed to do is providing council with a quarterly update of the financial details or performance of the town. We're trying to align it when the CAO brings forward the performance plan that we do updates at the same time. So that's why we're bringing it forward during the September SIC, although I understand it's a little bit behind in the sense that Q2 ended on June 30th. Next slide, please. So again, financial reporting, we had provided a schedule at the SIC in May. So we're at the Q2 reporting for September. The expectation is that the third quarter will come in November of 2021. And of course, the year-end reporting will occur sometime in March, early April. One thing that we've also included and updated to our website is a financial report section with the variance analysis that includes these reports, and that can be found on the town's website under financial reports / variance analysis. Next slide, please. So in terms of the operating budget, there's some highlights that I'll go over. I also include a table of where each department is and sort of where we expect them to be at this time of year. I will go over a little bit some of the details as to what's happening in each department, but I'll start off with saying again, the town continues to be in a very good financial position. We did see some increased pressures with respect to the pandemic. However, the funding that we've received so far from the province and the feds will continue to offset any losses we believe at this point. There could still be, if there were additional shutdowns, there would be possibly some concern at that point. But I think right now we're seeing quite a bit of stability in terms of the use of the recreation programs that are open. And that would be the largest sort of area of revenue that we would be concerned with. Again, the financial stability of the town has been supported through many, many, many years of sound financial decisions and a healthy level of growth that will continue into the future. The table on the next slide illustrates the net impact of each department on the year-to-date surplus. Again, at this point in the year, we would expect that in general, each department should be at about 50% of budgeted values. And at this point, on average, we are at 44.2% or slightly more favorable than what would be expected. So well on our way. Next slide, please. So you can see here, if we take a look at the results, I've compared 2021 to 2020, and we also show 2019. The variance percentage showing in 2021, the third column over, tells us where we're at for the year thus far. You'll note that the environmental and water services is actually at 58.6, but I'll just explain that this is a non-tax supported department. And essentially what is shown there is the budgeted transfer from or to reserves for the end of the year. And we're comparing the amount that would be transferred at this point. So we're actually in a more favorable position than what would be expected. Next slide, please. From a highlight situation, taxation is well underway. Of course, the final billing was issued in July 2021, so it doesn't show up in this quarter quite yet. When we bring the Q3 update, we'll see the entire year's taxes at that point. There's a slight variance, again, mostly due to timing and how we budget the supplemental, so no concerns there. General government, again, in total, slightly favorable, a lot due to the timing of expenses, a little less in COVID-19 expenses than what we expected at this point in the year. And also on the P3 advisory services for the terminals, the RFP is in progress, but we have not yet seen large amounts of payments yet. Protection services, again, in a favorable variance. Lots, again, due to the timing of repairs and maintenance for buildings and vehicles, but overall doing well and in line with what we would expect. Next slide, please. Transportation services has a favorable variance, again, about 9.6%. Bigger projects here in terms of the type of spending. So the stormwater master plan the study isn't completed. So we haven't seen a lot of payments through there yet. In terms of the capital program, when it comes to transportation and public works, I call the quarter 1 and quarter 2 kind of the no-show timeframe, because things don't really start to get underway until the construction season gets moving. So it's not surprising to me, nor should it be, that this variance is quite a bit higher than the other departments. Again, as we fund portions of the capital program through the operating fund, we have not yet made those transfers because they're not necessary yet. So you see a slight favorable variance there too. Environmental services, as I talked about, this is a non-tax supported department, and it includes both wastewater and the water department. At this point in time, it's slightly more favorable than what we would expect. Salaries are a little bit favorable to budget by 4%, and machine rental costs are much lower than anticipated for this time of the year. Next slide, please. Again, affordable housing is on track as it was in the last quarter. If we look at PRC, there is a 14% favorableness in that department. To be honest, it's the one area that we've been, well, I shouldn't say the one area, it's one of the areas we've been keeping a close eye on. Although revenues are unfavorable by almost greater than 30%, the closure of facilities has offset this and we've had some savings, in expenses, and have assisted in maintaining the budget to this point. So salaries are favorable to budget due mainly to the redistribution of staff and a vacant position. There's been a reduction in the repairs and maintenance at this point in the year, and also utilities, obviously, since the recreation facilities were closed for that second quarter for the most part. That has decreased the expenses as well, which has helped greatly in this area. Library is within planned expectations, again, slightly favorable. And then planning and development is also favorable. Largely, again, the official plan has started off, but we have not seen any expenses associated with that. And that is a big portion of the department's expenses for 2021. And next slide, please. With respect to the capital plan, as I talked about, it is well underway, but we'll see a big or a major update as part of the quarter 3 analysis as the construction season progresses. The table on the next slide will illustrate again the net impact of each department with respect to the capital budget. I'm only showing it as expenses and not as the revenues offsetting them, because essentially the entire capital budget is offset either through reserve transfers or through the transfer from the operating budget. But it at least allows us, when we see the total expenses, to monitor the actual expenditures against the budget. Next slide, please. Thank you. So if you take a look overall, the total capital budget was, in terms of expenditures, was just over 38 million. At this point, we've spent about 4.5 million. Now, again, the non-tax supported or environmental and water services has been highlighted just to show you that it represents the reversal of any budgeted transfers. But again, as I expected at this point in time, things haven't progressed quite as far. It's comparable to previous years, of course, just because of the timing of that construction season starting. So if you look at, for example, 2020 in comparison to this year, we're almost exactly at the same point in terms of spending. And to be honest, again, next quarter will be where we see a really big influx in it and a change in this report. I think that's about it. I think that's, we can go to the next slide. It is, thanks. And that's it for the departmental update.
Thank you very much, Treasurer Quinlan. As this is a departmental update, I'll just look to council for any questions or comments on the update. Seeing none, I'll look to the clerk. Do we have any other departmental updates tonight, Sarah? No? All right. That takes us then to item 9, which is other business. Councillor Jeffrey.
Thank you, Mayor Saunderson. So this is, given the timing of the federal election and FCM's advocacy work on behalf of municipalities, this is my only opportunity to give a brief update to council as to how they can engage in the process with respect to initiatives that are significantly important for our municipality. If all you remember is ourfrontlinesolutions.ca, ourfrontlinesolutions.ca. That is FCM's outline of the platform with which they are pursuing all of the parties in the federal election. There is an advocacy tool available there for you. They've already preloaded your candidates, the candidates by riding. So you can do a letter to them to promote or get their response with respect to your priorities for our municipality. And so just really important, I think, that we engage, especially with the quick turnaround time. FCM, we're going to provide a template for a notice of motion to support FCM initiatives. That won't work for us because we would be doing the notice of motion, and even if we waived, it would be the evening of the 20th of the election. So that won't work for us. So the four categories briefly are building for the future, and that of course is infrastructure, permanent doubling of the gas tax, which is now known as the Community Building Fund, the affordable places to live, which includes the rapid housing funding and other such things for our crisis in housing, digital inclusion for all Canadians, which includes the broadband asks, and you'd be surprised how close to us people are having broadband challenges and not being able to compete in the global economy. And then governments working together, which we saw very clearly, the intergovernmental working, how much better it was for municipalities and how much more quickly we'd get the funding that the Treasurer referred to, and making things better for us in our operations. So please engage, and thank you for allowing me the time to bring it up this evening.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffrey. We will all go and check out our frontlinesolutions.ca. Is there any other business for this afternoon, Council? Seeing none, that brings us to item 10, public delegations. Clerk Thomas, do we have anyone who would like to speak to SIC tonight? No.
No, we don't.
All right. Well, then that brings us to the adjournment. And just before we do adjourn, I'll look to Chair McLeod. What time would you like to convene the Corporate and Community Services meeting?
We shall begin at 5:30, please.
5:30. Okay. All right. And now I will look for a motion to adjourn. Councillor Jeffrey, all in favor? Thank you very much, Council. That was a busy meeting, and we started our busy fall. So nose to the grindstone. And I will see Corporate Community Services in 18 minutes. Good night to all the others. Thank you.